Hi guys, tonight we slip quietly into the long low shape of a Viking Longship as it waits at the edge of dark water, rocking just enough to remind you that land is already letting go of you. You step aboard barefoot or nearly so, because leather soles slide on damp planks, and the first thing you notice is how narrow everything feels. The ship does not invite you in, it tolerates you. The boards under your feet are cold even in summer, polished smooth by salt sand and hundreds of other feet that stood here long before yours. You probably will not survive this, at least not comfortably, and that is part of the point. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you are listening somewhere far from the sea, tell me in the comments where you are and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights and let the ship carry you forward. You crouch instinctively because standing upright feels wrong. The mast rises above you like a tree trapped indoors, and every rib of the ship curves inward, hugging the space, until there is nowhere to hide from it. This is not a cabin. There are no rooms. What historians agree on is that Viking longships were built for speed, flexibility, and shallow water, not comfort, and that decision echoes into every inch of how you're about to sleep. The hull presses close on both sides, as if reminding you that tonight personal space is a luxury no one can afford. As you move farther in, your hand trails along the wood without thinking. It is rough in places, sticky in others where tar was smeared thick to keep the sea out. The smell hits next. Pine tar, wet oak wool, soaked and dried and soaked again, old smoke clinging to cloaks, and the unmistakable human note of bodies that have been living close together for weeks. It is not unbearable, but it is intimate in a way modern life rarely allows. There is no pretending here. Everyone smells like travel. You glance down and realize how low the benches are. These long wooden seats run along the sides of the ship, serving as rowing stations by day and by night, the closest thing to a bed you will find. A mainstream historical fact slips in quietly here. Archaeological finds and saga descriptions suggest that Viking crews often slept right where they rowed, using their benches as both furniture and foundation. There was no transformation ceremony where the ship became cozy. Night simply arrived and people adapted. You shift your weight and feel the ship respond, a subtle roll that makes your stomach tighten just a little. That movement never fully stops. Even now, tied or anchored, the water speaks through the hull. Some scholars still debate whether this constant motion helped sailors sleep by acting like a cradle, or whether it kept them in a state of half-waking alertness. As you stand here, you suspect the answer is both. Someone brushes past you close enough that your shoulders touch. There is an unspoken choreography at work, bodies sliding around each other without apology. You notice shields stacked along the side, their painted faces turned inward, catching faint light. By day they are protection. By night they become windbreaks, pillows or barriers against spray. A quirky tidbit drifts through your thoughts. Some shields show wear patterns that suggest they were leaned on constantly, not just in battle, but during rest-absorbing sweat salt and sleep-deprived sighs. You finally lower yourself onto a bench, knees bent awkwardly, because stretching out fully would mean stealing space from someone else. The wood is harder than you expect and colder. There is no insulation between you and the sea, but a few inches of timber. You feel that separation keenly, especially if you imagine waves pressing from the other side. You're not meant to forget where you are. Comfort here is temporary and borrowed. Around you the ship settles into its nighttime voice. Ropes creak softly as they adjust. Water laps against the hull in irregular rhythms, never quite repeating. Somewhere nearby, someone clears their throat, the sound loud in the enclosed space. You realize how darkness will change everything soon. Once the sun is gone, the ship becomes a shared shadow, a place where shapes blur and every sound feels closer. You pull your cloak tighter already, thinking about warmth even before the temperature drops. Wool scratches your neck, but you're grateful for it. Vikings relied heavily on layered wool clothing, not because it was luxurious, but because it retained warmth, even when damp. This is one of those quietly impressive facts that rarely makes it into dramatic retellings. Survival here is built from small, sensible choices repeated every day. As you settle, your body starts negotiating with reality. Your back complains, your legs tingle, your mind searches for familiar bedtime cues that are not here. No pillow, no mattress, no walls to shut out the world, and yet there is something oddly grounding about knowing exactly what surrounds you. Wood, water, people, nothing hidden, nothing padded. You close your eyes for a moment just to test it and immediately feel the ship move beneath you again. It is subtle, but your inner ear notices. The sensation is neither pleasant nor unpleasant yet. It simply exists. This is how sleep will come tonight, if it comes at all. Not as an escape, but as a surrender. You think briefly about home, about beds that do not shift, and rooms that do not breathe. That thought feels distant already. Here, sleep is not a private retreat. It is a communal pause. Everyone aboard will share it or fail at it together. The ship creaks once more, settling into a steady rhythm as the last light fades. You adjust your position by a few careful inches, mindful of the bodies on either side of you. The longship does not care whether you are ready. Night has arrived anyway, and this narrow bench, this cold wood, is where your story begins to slow. You shift again carefully, because every small movement ripples outward. Finding your sleeping spot is not a private decision. It is a quiet negotiation with everyone around you, a negotiation conducted without words. You learn quickly to read the space by feel. A knee here means someone already claimed that stretch. A coil of rope there suggests it will be needed before dawn. A shield tucked upright against the hull marks a boundary that no one bothers to explain. You settle where the bench dips, just slightly worn thinner by years of use. It is not softer exactly, but it fits your body in a way that suggests many others have tried this same angle and decided it was acceptable enough. That seems to be the guiding principle here. Acceptable enough. Vikings did not chase ideal sleeping conditions. They chased conditions that did not actively defeat them. Your cloak becomes your primary tool. You fold it once, then twice, experimenting with thickness. Too thin and the wood bites through the wool. Too thick and it bunches under your spine, forcing your neck forward. Eventually you find a compromise and tuck the edge beneath your shoulder. This is your pillow now. A mainstream historical fact slides in gently. Written sources and textile finds suggest cloaks were multifunctional essentials used as clothing, bedding, and even shelter. On a longship at night, they became all three at once. You glance along the bench line, gauging how far you can stretch your legs without provoking a sharp intake of breath from a neighbour. Feet overlap here, ankles touch. Someone's calf presses lightly against yours, warm through layers of fabric. No one reacts. Physical closeness is not intimacy in this space. It is logistics. You learn to relax into it, to let your muscles soften instead of bracing. Near your head, a sea chest sits wedged under the bench. It smells faintly of iron and dried leather. Inside are personal items that will not be unpacked tonight. Knives, combs, maybe a carved token from home. The chest doubles as a backstop, keeping you from rolling backward when the ship tilts. A quirky tidbit floats through your tired thoughts. Some excavated chests show wear marks on their corners that suggest they were leaned against repeatedly, not just stored, but lived with, pressed into service as furniture barriers and silent companions during sleep. You adjust again, this time slower. The ship answers with a gentle sway as if acknowledging your presence. You realize there is a shared understanding at work. Everyone aboard knows that sleep will be shallow and temporary. There is no point in fighting it too hard. Historians still argue whether Viking crews developed specific sleep strategies at sea, or whether they simply endured irregular rest and trusted their bodies to adapt. Lying here, you suspect adaptation happened whether anyone planned it or not. The air feels cooler now that you are still. Heat drains from you into the wood. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, drawing it up near your ears. The smell of wool is stronger here, lanolin mixing with salt. It is not unpleasant. It is grounding. Each scent anchors you to the reality of the ship and the people sharing it. You notice how the darkness gathers. There are no lamps lit now. Fire aboard a wooden ship is always a risk, especially at night. The faintest glow comes from the open sky above a pale suggestion of stars filtering down between mast and rigging. Shapes become suggestions rather than certainties. You know the person beside you is there because you can feel their warmth, not because you can see them. A low murmur travels down the length of the ship. Someone whispers a joke or a comment too soft to catch. A few quiet chuckles follow. Then silence again. These moments matter. They ease the transition into rest, reminding everyone that they are not alone in their discomfort. Shared humour becomes a kind of blanket. Your body continues its slow inventory, back pressed to wood, hips slightly numb already, neck angled just so. You consider shifting again, then decide against it. Every adjustment costs energy, and energy feels precious. You focus instead on breathing slow and measured, matching the rise and fall beneath you. You think briefly about who chose this spot before you. Maybe someone younger restless turning all night. Maybe someone older who learned exactly how to wedge themselves for maximum rest. That lineage of bodies leaves its mark, smoothing the bench, shaping it into something like a memory. The ship creaks softly, a sound that seems to come from everywhere at once. It is not a complaint. It is a conversation between wood and water. You let it wash over you, noticing how it fills the silence without demanding attention. Your eyes grow heavy, not because you're comfortable, but because you're tired enough to accept discomfort. Sleep here is not a destination. It is a brief harbour. You sink into it inch by inch, trusting that this narrow bench, this borrowed warmth, will hold you long enough. As you lie there, the smell of the ship grows more noticeable, not sharper but deeper, as if it has layers that only reveal themselves when everything slows down. At first it was just wood and water. Now, with your eyes closed and your body still, the air tells a longer story. Pine tar clings to the hull, sweet and bitter, at the same time sealing gaps against the sea. It is mixed with the scent of damp oak, old salt and wool that has been warmed by bodies and cooled again by night air. You breathe it in without meaning to, and your mind reacts before you can judge it. This smell would be overwhelming on land. Here it feels appropriate. It smells like movement, like work, like people who have not bathed properly in far too long. A mainstream historical fact settles quietly into the moment. Vikings did bathe more often than many people assume, but at sea fresh water was limited and saved for drinking. Cleanliness became a secondary concern, negotiated carefully against survival. The scent of wool is everywhere. Cloaks, tunics, blankets, all carrying traces of smoke from old fires, sweat from rowing, and the faint animal smell of the sheep they once came from. Wool holds on to memory. It remembers rainstorms, cold mornings, long days of labour. As it warms around you, it releases those memories slowly into the air. You shift your head slightly and catch a stronger whiff near your shoulder, comforting in its familiarity. There is also the smell of iron. Weapons rest close by, blades oiled, but never truly scentless. The metal gives off a cold, sharp note that cuts through the softer smells. Somewhere nearby, a spearhead or axe blade rests against wood, ready to be grabbed in the dark if needed. A quirky tidbit drifts through your thoughts. Some archaeological blaze show traces of organic oils mixed with animal fat, suggesting sailors used whatever was available to keep rust away, even if it added another layer to the ship's distinctive smell. Underneath it all is the human scent. Dozens of bodies breathing, sweating lightly, even in the cold, carrying the odours of old meals and hard work. No one smells good. No one smells especially bad. It all blends into a single shared presence. This is what happens when people live close together for long periods. Individual identity softens at the edges. You notice how the smell changes when the ship rocks. As the hull tilts, dampness shifts, releasing cooler, sharper notes from below. You imagine seawater sloshing gently against the planks just inches away, pressing its own clean mineral scent upward through the wood. It never fully breaks through, but it reminds you that the sea is always there listening. Your breathing slows, and with it your awareness sharpens in strange ways. Scents seem louder in the dark. Each inhale feels deliberate. You wonder briefly how long it took sailors to stop noticing it all, to let these smells fade into the background of their minds. Historians still argue whether people in the past experienced sensory environments the same way we do, or whether constant exposure reshaped their tolerance and perception. Right now you are still new enough to notice everything. Somewhere down the ship someone shifts in their sleep. The movement stirs the air, carrying a faint sour note that suggests last night's food. Dried fish maybe, or grain, porridge lingering on breath and fabric. It is not pleasant, but it is honest. Food here is fuel, not ceremony. You tuck your chin deeper into your cloak, partly for warmth, partly to control what you breathe in. The wool filters the air, slightly softening the sharper edges. This small act feels like reclaiming a sliver of comfort. You cannot change the ship, but you can adjust how you meet it. The smells begin to blur as your body relaxes further. They lose their individual names and merge into something whole. Ship smell, sea journey smell, it becomes a constant, like the sound of water or the pressure of wood beneath you. Your mind stops cataloguing and starts accepting. You realize this, and a small sense of relief follows. Acceptance is the key to sleeping here. Not liking it, not mastering it, just letting it be what it is. The ship exhales around you, full of tar and wool and human breath, and you let it carry you closer to rest. Darkness arrives without ceremony. One moment there is a faint sense of shape above you, the mast outlined against a dim sky, and the next it is gone, swallowed by night. You feel the change more than you see it. The longship tightens around you as shadows settle into every corner, and the space that already felt narrow now feels deeper, heavier, like a held breath. Your eyes adjust slowly, but there is little to reward the effort. The world reduces itself to touch and sound, wood beneath you, wool against your cheek, the steady presence of another body nearby, close enough that you can feel warmth but not features. Night at sea does not care whether you are ready for it. It simply takes over. On land, darkness often means rest. Here it means alertness mixed with fatigue. The ship feels different without daylight. During the day it is a tool. At night it becomes a shelter, a fragile bubble of wood floating on something vast and unseen. Evidence from sagas and later accounts suggests that sailors were deeply aware of this shift, treating nighttime at sea with quiet seriousness rather than fear or bravado. You listen more closely now. Sounds that were easy to ignore before grow sharper. Water sliding along the hull has texture, a soft scrape followed by a hollow glug as waves fold back on themselves. Ropes creak in slow complaint, adjusting to changes in tension as the ship moves. Somewhere high above the rigging hums faintly when the wind touches it just right. A cough breaks the stillness, quickly stifled. Another sailor shifts the bench, groaning softly in response. These noises feel louder than they should not because they are disruptive, but because there is nothing else competing with them. Darkness strips the world down to essentials. You think briefly about light, about how little of it is allowed here. Open flames are rare at night aboard a ship like this. Wooden hulls, tarred seams, and dry rope make fire an ever-present danger. Many crews prefer to let darkness do its work rather than risk disaster for the sake of visibility. That choice, practical and cautious, shapes how you experience this moment. Your sense of time loosens. Without visual cues, minutes stretch and compress unpredictably. You are not sure how long you have been lying here. 5 minutes could be 20. 20 could be 5. Sleep does not arrive in a clean descent. It drifts, pulls back, tests you. An odd detail floats through your mind. Some sailors believe that speaking too much at night could invite bad luck or unwanted attention from the sea itself. Whether superstition or habit, the result was the same. Silence ruled after sunset. You feel that silence now, not empty, but full of unspoken agreement. You turn your head slightly and feel the wool drag against your skin. The simple act reminds you how little room there is to move. Every adjustment must be small, deliberate. The ship responds anyway, a gentle sway that travels through your bones. You imagine how this motion might feel after weeks at sea, whether it would become comforting or simply unavoidable. There is disagreement among researchers about how deeply people slept under these conditions. Some argue that true extended sleep was rare, replaced by short stretches of rest punctuated by waking awareness. Others suggest that exhaustion eventually overcame discomfort, pulling sailors into deeper sleep despite noise and motion. Lying here, you suspect both are true depending on the night, the weather, and the person. A faint sound reaches you from the water, something larger than a wave, something moving beneath the surface. It could be a fish, it could be nothing at all. In the dark, imagination fills in gaps eagerly. You resist the urge to open your eyes, knowing it would not change what you can see. Instead, you focus inward. Your breathing becomes an anchor. Inhale through wool-scented air. Exhale slowly, letting tension drain into the bench. Your muscles begin to soften despite the hardness beneath you. The human body is remarkably adaptable when it must be. The darkness feels thicker now, pressing gently against your closed eyes. It is not threatening, it is enveloping. The ship creaks again, and this time the sound feels familiar, almost reassuring. Wood adjusting to water. Nothing breaking, nothing urgent. You realize that the Longship has its own nighttime rhythm, slower and more patient than during the day. Rowing is over, voices are low or absent, movement is minimal. The ship, like its crew, is resting in its own way. As your thoughts begin to drift, the edges of the world soften. The darkness no longer feels like an absence of light, but like a presence of its own, holding everything together. You let it do that work for you, trusting that for now, this small wooden vessel is enough. Your body starts asking practical questions now. Where does your weight actually rest? What happens to your arms? How do you stop your legs from going numb? This is the moment when you realize what you're sleeping on, or more accurately, what you're not sleeping on. There is no mattress waiting to meet you halfway, no padding hidden beneath the bench, just solid wood shaped by use and necessity. You slide your hand beneath your cloak, checking how much fabric you have to work with. The wool is thick but uneven, folded more by instinct than design. You tuck one edge beneath your hip, another beneath your shoulder, trying to distribute pressure without stealing too much space. It is a quiet experiment. Too much movement would ripple outward and announce itself to everyone nearby. Archaeological evidence suggests that this kind of improvisation was normal. Bedding in the modern sense did not exist aboard longships. Sailors relied on what they carried on their backs or stored in small personal chests. Cloaks spare tunic, sometimes a thin layer of straw if space allowed. Comfort was assembled nightly and dismantled by morning. You feel the bench through everything. It presses into your spine in a way that makes you aware of each vertebra. At first, your muscles resist holding tension, as if expecting relief that never comes. Gradually, they give up. The wood does not change. You do. That surrender feels oddly calming, like letting go of an argument you know you cannot win. Nearby, someone uses a rolled-up tunic as a headrest, stuffing it beneath their neck with practiced ease. You follow their example, sliding a sleeve under your jaw. It lifts your head just enough to reduce the strain. A small victory. These tiny adjustments matter more than grand solutions here. A lesser-known detail surfaces as you settle. Some historical accounts hint that sea chests were sometimes positioned deliberately to support backs or keep sleepers from rolling. The furniture of the ship was not fixed. It shifted nightly, reshaped by tired bodies seeking rest wherever it could be found. The ship rocks gently and your body reacts without asking permission. Muscles tighten, then loosen, learning the rhythm. This motion makes certain positions impossible. Sleeping flat on your back feels risky. On your side, you can brace slightly, letting gravity hold you in place. You turn carefully, stopping the moment you sense resistance from the person beside you. There is a shared awareness at work. Everyone knows how little room there is. You tuck your knees just enough to avoid overlapping too much with someone else's space. The position is not elegant, but it is so. Your cloak pulls tighter around your legs, trapping warmth. The wool scratches faintly, a reminder that softness is relative. Academic opinions remain divided on whether sailors develop preferred sleeping postures specifically for life at sea. Some suggest habitual side sleeping became common because it worked best with narrow benches and constant movement. Others argue people simply adapted night by night, guided by discomfort rather than strategy. Either way, your body seems to be learning quickly. Your awareness drifts to your hands. You're not sure where to put them. Let them hang over the edge and risk cold air. Tuck them beneath your chest and cut off circulation. Eventually you slide one hand beneath your cloak at your waist, the other resting lightly against your thigh. It feels secure enough. The ship makes a deeper sound now, a low creak that travels through the bench and into your bones. You register it without alarm. Nothing is shifting suddenly, nothing is wrong. You remind yourself that these sounds are signs of integrity, not failure. Wood moving means wood holding. The bench beneath you has a faint curve shaped by time and use. That curve cradles you just slightly, preventing you from rolling too far. It is not kindness, it is coincidence. Still, you accept it gratefully. Your breathing slows again, with fewer adjustments left to make. Your mind has less to focus on. The discomfort fades into the background, replaced by a dull, manageable awareness. This is as good as it gets, and surprisingly that is enough. You close your eyes fully now, no longer testing the darkness. The ship holds steady beneath you. Cloakwood motion and fatigue combine into something like rest. Not perfect, not deep, but real. Sleep does not mean solitude here. Even with your eyes closed, you are constantly aware of how many others share this narrow space with you. Bodies press close, not aggressively, just inevitably. A shoulder brushes yours when someone exhales deeply. A knee shifts and finds yours for a moment before retreating. No one apologizes. There is no point. This closeness is built into the design of the ship and accepted without comment. You become aware of breathing patterns around you, some slow and steady, others uneven, interrupted by small snores or sudden inhales. The ship feels like a single organism made of many smaller ones, all settling into a shared rhythm. This is not the kind of closeness people talk about romantically. It is practical, unfiltered, and oddly comforting once you stop resisting it. Historical reconstructions of longship crews suggest that space was always at a premium. Ships were designed to carry people, weapons, food, and supplies across long distances as efficiently as possible. Anything that did not serve that purpose was left behind. Privacy did not make the cut. You feel that choice now every time your elbow meets someone else's side. Your awareness sharpens when a weapon shifts nearby. An axe handle knocks softly against wood as its owner adjusts in their sleep. The sound is quiet but unmistakable. Weapons are always within reach even at night. Not because danger is expected every moment, but because readiness is a habit that never fully turns off. You instinctively avoid moving your arm too far in that direction. One curious detail from the archaeological record is how often weapons show signs of everyday wear, unrelated to combat. Handles smoothed by constant handling, leather grips darkened by sweat. These were not objects reserved for moments of crisis. They lived alongside their owners, even during sleep, sharing the same cramped space. You shift slightly to ease pressure on your hip, careful not to disturb anyone too much. The person beside you responds by shifting as well, the movement subtle and cooperative. This unspoken coordination is learned quickly. A ship like this demands awareness of others at all times. Even rest becomes a group activity. Your cloak brushes against someone else's, the wool fibres catching briefly before sliding apart. The sound is soft, almost like a whisper. In the darkness, such small noises feel amplified. You wonder how long it took sailors to stop reacting to every rustle, every sigh. Some researchers believe that constant exposure to shared space trained people to tune out non-threatening stimuli more effectively than we do today. In here, you feel that process beginning. There is warmth in this closeness. Bodies generate heat, and that heat collects along the benches, especially when the air cools at night. You feel it along your back and legs, a shared resource distributed without discussion. No one pulls away from it. Cold is a greater enemy than discomfort. Someone near your feet murmurs in their sleep. Words indistinct, perhaps a fragment of a dream. The sound passes without comment. Dreams are private even when bodies are not. You let the murmur fade, returning your attention to your own breathing. Your thoughts wander briefly to how strange this would feel at home, how unacceptable it would be to sleep pressed so closely to strangers. That comparison feels less relevant here. Context reshapes expectations quickly. On this ship, closeness equals safety. Distance would mean falling overboard, being alone, or being exposed. There has long been disagreement among historians about whether longship crews were mostly composed of kin or mixed groups. Some evidence points to family ties. Other sources suggest crews often included unrelated individuals brought together by opportunity or obligation. Whatever the truth, nights like this would blur those distinctions. Familiar or not, everyone becomes simply a buddy sharing. You adjust your cloak again, this time tugging it slightly over your shoulder. The movement brushes someone else's arm. They do not stir. The trust required for this kind of rest is quiet but profound. You trust that no one will harm you in your sleep. They trust the same of you. That mutual assumption is the foundation beneath everything else. The ship creaks softly, a sound that travels along the benches like a low sigh. You feel it through the wood and through the bodies around you. For a moment it feels as if everyone inhales together, then exhales. The illusion fades, but the sense of shared presence remains. Your mind begins to loosen its grip on individual sensations. The edges blur. Warmth, pressure, sound, and motion blend into a single experience. You're not alone here, and for once that does not feel overwhelming. It feels necessary. Even as sleep begins to take hold, the motion never leaves you alone. The longship rocks beneath your body in slow, uneven patterns, not the gentle sway people imagine from calm harbours, but something more irregular. A lift here, a dip there. Each movement travels through the wood, through the bench, and straight into your muscles. Your body responds before your mind does, tightening, then releasing, learning the rhythm without asking permission. At first, this movement feels intrusive. Just as you start to drift, the ship leans slightly, nudging you back toward awareness. Your stomach shifts. Your inner ear sends a quiet warning. You breathe through it, reminding yourself that this is normal here. The sea is never still, and neither is anything that floats on it. Over time, something changes. The motion becomes predictable in its unpredictability. You stop bracing against it. Your muscles soften, allowing the ship to carry you instead of fighting it. This surrender feels strange but necessary. Sailors who spent long periods at sea often described land as feeling unstable when they vol. They finally returned a sign of how deeply the body adapted to constant motion. Your breathing begins to sync with the rise and fall beneath you. Inhale as the ship lifts, exhale as it settles. It's not perfect, but it helps. The movement becomes a background presence, like the sound of rain or distant wind. Still there, still felt, just no longer demanding your full attention. There is no agreement among researchers about whether this rocking helped or hindered sleep overall. Some argue it acted like a cradle encouraging rest once the body adjusted. Others point out that irregular waves and sudden shifts likely prevented deep, uninterrupted sleep. Lying here half awake and half drifting, you suspect the truth depends on the sea itself. Calm water soothes. Rough water refuses to let you forget where you are. A slightly stronger roll presses your shoulder into the person beside you. They respond instinctively, shifting just enough to accommodate the movement. No one fully wakes. The ship absorbs the motion, spreading it out, softening its edges. This cooperation between vessel and crew feels practiced, even if no one ever explained it aloud. You become aware of how the bench helps. Its narrowness keeps you from sliding too far. Its slight curve holds you in place. Sleeping on the floor of a wider space would feel more dangerous here. The bench gives your body boundaries to work with, something solid to trust. A small but revealing detail comes to mind. Some reconstructed longships tested by modern crews show that sleeping positions change naturally with wave direction. People turn without realizing it, aligning themselves with the ship's movement rather than against it. You notice yourself doing the same, adjusting your angle by inches until the rocking feels less disruptive. Your thoughts drift in and out, carried along by motion. Images blur. Sounds stretch. You're not fully asleep, but you are no longer fully present either. This in-between state feels familiar, like resting on a long train ride or dozing in the backseat of a car. Except here, the stakes feel higher, even if nothing is actually happening. The ship creaks again, deeper this time, a reminder of its size and weight. You feel reassured rather than alarmed. The sound means the wood is flexing, responding, doing what it was built to do. Longships were designed to move with the sea rather than resist it, a principle that made them fast and surprisingly resilient. Your body grows heavier. The motion no longer pulls you upward into alertness. Instead, it seems to press you gently downward, anchoring you to the bench. You let it happen. There is no benefit in staying tense. The sea will not negotiate with you. As your awareness fades further, the rocking blends into your dreams, shaping them without your consent. You float, you fall, you rise again. The ship carries you through it all, steady in its own uneven way, asking only that you trust it enough to rest. The sounds never truly stop. Even as your thoughts soften and stretch, the longship keeps speaking around you, a low, constant conversation made of wood, water, and breath. At first, each sound demanded attention. Now they drift past more gently, like waves themselves noticed, and then released. Water is the loudest presence, though it never shouts. It slides along the hull with a steady whisper, occasionally punctuated by a sharper splash when a small wave meets the side just right. The sound is close, intimate, as if the sea is right beside your ear. You know rationally that only a few planks separate you from it, and that knowledge adds weight to every ripple. Above you, ropes creak and sigh as they respond to tiny changes in tension. The mast shifts slightly, a deep wooden groan that vibrates through the ship. These noises might seem alarming to someone unfamiliar with them, but to experienced sailors they were reassuring signs. A quiet ship is not always a healthy ship. Movement means life. There is a rhythm here, though it is not a simple one. Sounds overlap and fade. A rope creaks, a wave answers, someone exhales deeply nearby. The bench responds with a faint groan. Together they form a kind of nighttime music, uneven but continuous. You begin to recognize patterns within it, moments when the ship seems to settle, followed by moments when it reminds you it is still moving. Breathing becomes another layer in this soundscape. Around you, chests rise and fall at different tempos. Some breaths are slow and deep, others shallow and quick. A soft snore starts somewhere down the ship, pauses, then resumes, almost polite in its restraint. No one complains. Complaints waste energy. Accounts from later periods suggest that sailors learned to distinguish between ordinary ship noises and sounds that meant trouble. A change in tone, a sudden crack, a rhythm breaking unexpectedly. Your body listens for these differences even as you rest, maintaining a low level of awareness that never fully switches off. A small telling detail from experimental archaeology comes to mind. Modern crews sailing reconstructed longships often report that they wake instantly to unfamiliar sounds but sleep through constant ones. Your mind seems to be doing the same. The known noises fade. The unexpected ones hover just at the edge of attention. Someone shifts their weight nearby, causing the bench to creak more loudly than usual. Your eyes flicker open for a moment, then close again. The sound resolves itself. Nothing follows. The ship settles back into its steady murmur. You relax, reassured by the lack of urgency. Wind plays its part too, though lightly tonight. It brushes the rigging, creating a soft hum that rises and falls. Occasionally it sneaks down into the hull cooler than the air you have been breathing, carrying the clean scent of open water. That brief freshness cuts through the heavier smells, reminding you where you are headed. There is ongoing disagreement among scholars about how much sleep sailors actually got on nights like this. Some believe rest came in fragments interrupted by sound and duty. Others argue that the body adapted quickly, learning to filter noise and drop into sleep whenever possible. Listening now, you feel your own mind doing both, hovering between awareness and rest. The ship gives a deeper sound, a long creak that travels from one end to the other. It feels like a stretch, as if the vessel itself is settling in for the night. You imagine the keel cutting gently through water, even while anchored, responding to currents you cannot see. Your own breathing slows further, finding a pace that fits into the ship's rhythm. Inhale, exhale. The sounds no longer form separate events. They blend into a single continuous presence, like being wrapped in a blanket made of noise. You notice that silence, when it appears, feels more unsettling than sound. A brief lull, a pause between waves, makes you tense slightly. Then the water returns and you relax again. Sound here equals normal. Silence suggests change. Somewhere far off a bird cries its call, thin and distant. It passes quickly, swallowed by the night. You wonder what it sees from above this narrow shape moving across dark water full of sleeping people who trust it with their lives. The longer you listen, the less effort it takes. Sounds slide past without catching. Your thoughts grow heavier, slower. The ship continues its quiet conversation and you let it speak without needing to understand every word. At some point you realize you are no longer counting sounds or identifying them. They have become part of the background of your dreams, shaping them gently. The longship does not fall silent. It simply carries you far enough inward that the noise feels like rest. Cold finds you eventually. It does not arrive all at once or announce itself dramatically. It seeps in slowly, testing weak spots, settling where fabric thins and skin presses close to wood. At first it is just a suggestion, a cooler patch along your back or the edge of your shoulder. You shift without fully waking, trying to tuck yourself tighter into what warmth you have. The bench beneath you draws heat away steadily. Wood feels neutral at first, then increasingly insistent. You pull your cloak closer, wrapping it across your chest and around your neck, careful not to leave your feet exposed. Wool helps even when damp, trapping pockets of warm air against your body. That simple property made it invaluable to people who lived outdoors and at sea long before anyone understood insulation in scientific terms. Bodies around you become part of the solution. Heat radiates subtly from the person beside you, enough to take the edge off the chill. You feel it along your arm and hip, shared without discussion or awareness. This is not generosity, it is mutual survival. Cold does not respect personal boundaries. Evidence from burial finds and preserved textiles shows how much effort went into producing thick wool garments in the Viking world. Spinning, weaving and fulling were labour-intensive processes, and warm clothing was a form of wealth. Lying here, wrapped in layers that took months to create, you feel that investment paying off in the simplest possible way. Your breath fogs faintly in the cooler air near your face. You tuck your chin deeper into your cloak, breathing through fabric to warm the air before it reaches your lungs. The smell of wool grows stronger, comforting in its familiarity. It reminds you of sheep smoke and long winters, even if you have never lived one yourself. Someone nearby shifts, pulling their own cloak tighter. The movement sends a small ripple of cold air across your skin before settling again. The ship answers with a soft creak, as if acknowledging the adjustment. Everything here is connected. One person moves, the whole system responds. There is no universal agreement about how sailors managed extreme cold on longer voyages. Some suggest additional layers were worn at night, even if they restricted movement. Others believe people relied more heavily on shared body heat and constant motion to stay warm. On this relatively calm night, you sense both strategies at work. Layers slow the cold. Proximity keeps it from winning. Your feet grow cold first. You wiggle your toes inside your footwear, trying to restore circulation. The movement is small but deliberate. You know better than to kick or stretch too far. Space is limited, and a sudden movement could disrupt someone else's fragile rest. Instead, you tuck your feet closer to your body, curling slightly inward. The air itself feels different now, heavier, denser. Night air at sea cools quickly, especially away from land. Without walls to trap warmth, the ship relies on bodies and fabric alone. You imagine how this would feel farther north in colder seasons and feel a flicker of respect for those who endured it regularly. A minor but revealing detail surfaces in your thoughts. Some longship crews carried animal skins in addition to wool, using them sparingly when temperatures dropped. Fur trapped heat efficiently but was bulky and heavy. Space constraints meant it could not be used lavishly. Choices were always compromises. You listen to the sounds around you, noticing how even they seem muted by the cold. Wood contracts slightly. Ropes grow stiffer. The ship's voice lowers, deepens. It feels more solid, somehow less flexible, but more resolute. You find that reassuring. Your body settles into a steady, heat-conserving stillness. Movement slow. Muscles relax just enough to reduce energy use. This is an instinctive response one shared with countless generations before you. The night is not something to conquer. It is something to endure quietly. As sleep deepens, the cold recedes to the edges of awareness. It does not disappear, but it stops demanding attention. Wrapped in wool, pressed close to others, rocked gently by water, you hover in a narrow band of warmth carved out of a much colder world. The ship holds that warmth as best it can. You trust it to keep doing so until morning. You sense the change before you hear it. The ship's movement grows sharper, less predictable, as if the sea has decided to test the edges of everyone's patience. A stronger gust of wind slips down into the hull cooler, and more insistent than before. The longship answers with a deeper roll enough to pull you partway out of sleep and remind you how thin the line is between rest and readiness. Storms do not announce themselves politely. They gather press closer and then make their presence known through motion. The bench tilts beneath you, not dramatically, but enough that you tighten your grip on your cloak without thinking. Someone nearby mutters in their sleep, a low sound swallowed quickly by the ship's creaking response. You listen more carefully now. Waves strike the hull with a firmer hand, the water no longer whispering but tapping, then slapping as if trying to get someone's attention. The sound travels along the planks and into your chest. It is not panic-inducing, but it is unmistakable. The sea is awake. The ship flexes boards, shifting against one another with long groaning notes. This is not failure, this is design. Longships were built to bend rather than break their overlapping planks, allowing movement under pressure. That flexibility kept them alive in rough water, even if it made nights like this uncomfortable. You brace your feet instinctively, curling them inward to keep from sliding. The person beside you does the same, your movements briefly synchronized. No one speaks, there is no need. Everyone feels the same thing. The shared understanding tightens the space, making it feel smaller but more focused. Another roll presses you harder into the bench. Your shoulder nudges against wood. Your hip protests. You grit your teeth and breathe, slowly counting the rise and fall. Panic wastes energy. Calm conserves it. This lesson is learned quickly at sea. There are differing views among historians about how often Viking crews sailed through storms versus waiting them out. Some readings of the sagas suggest boldness, even recklessness. Other interpretations point to careful seamanship and a preference for hugging coastlines when weather turned dangerous. Whatever the case, nights like this were not rare, and sailors learned to rest whenever the sea allowed it. A sudden splash sends cold spray sneaking into the hull, misting your face and soaking the edge of your cloak. You flinch, then still yourself. The water is icy, shocking against skin warmed by shared heat. You wipe your cheek against your sleeve and pull the damp fabric closer, knowing wool will still insulate even when wet. Someone farther down the ship shifts more forcefully, perhaps repositioning to keep balance. The bench creaks loudly in protest, then settles. No alarm follows. The sound fades back into the larger chorus of wind and water. You become acutely aware of the ship's length now. Each wave lifts one end before the other, sending a rolling sensation through your body like a slower heartbeat. The mast hums faintly under strain ropes tightening and loosening in response. Above you unseen, the sail stirs or strains depending on how much has been raised. A small but telling detail surfaces in your thoughts. Accounts from later seafarers describe how sleep during storms became a kind of practiced endurance, less about drifting off and more about conserving strength while half awake. You feel that balance now hovering between rest and vigilance. Your dreams, when they come, are restless. Images tilt and sway. You fall and rise without context. Each time the ship lurches, your body pulls you back toward wakefulness, then releases you again when the motion steadies. This is not deep sleep. It is borrowed time. Gradually the waves lose some of their edge. The slapping softens back into a heavy rhythm. The wind eases, or at least shifts direction. The ship's movement smooths out, though it never fully settles. You loosen your grip on your cloak, realizing your hands have been clenched. Around you, breathing deepens again. The collective tension releases not all at once, but piece by piece. The storm does not vanish, it simply loosens its hold. You sink back into the bench muscles aching but compliant. The ship has proven itself once more, flexing, groaning and holding together. Trust rebuilds quietly, not through words, but through survival. Sleep returns in shallow waves, riding the memory of rough water towards something calmer. The longship continues forward, carrying you through the night, indifferent to fear, sustained by motion and steady enough to rest upon for now. As the ship steadies again, you become more aware of who sleeps where, not by sight but by feel and subtle cues you have already learned to read. The way some bodies seem firmly planted, barely shifting even when the hull rolls. The way others move, more often adjusting, reacting, learning. Space on a longship is not assigned randomly. It reflects experience, responsibility, and a quiet hierarchy that does not need to be explained out loud. You sense that those closer to the centre of the ship rest more securely. The movement there is gentler, buffered by the hull shape and the distribution of weight. Toward the ends, the motion is sharper, the rise and fall more dramatic. You are aware of this even without seeing it, feeling the difference through the bench beneath you. Where you sleep matters, even if everyone pretends it does not. Evidence from ship finds and written descriptions suggests that more experienced sailors often claimed the most stable spots not out of entitlement but out of habit and necessity. They knew where the ship behaved best in rough water. Newer crew members learned quickly by observing where others settled, copying without being told. Knowledge travelled this way through practice rather than instruction. You realise that your position feels deliberate now, even if no one formally placed you there. You were guided by subtle signals. A glance, a pause, someone shifting just enough to indicate a space was taken. The ship taught you its rules quietly and you followed them without protest. Nearby you sense a different kind of stillness. Someone sleeps deeply unmoving, their breathing slow and steady. This person has likely done this many times before. Their body trusts the ship enough to let go. Farther away, closer to the edge, another sleeper stirs, more often reacting to every change. You recognise yourself in that pattern, still new, still listening for danger. Rank aboard a longship did not always follow the strict lines people imagine. Leadership roles existed, of course, but experience often carried as much weight as title. Those who knew how the ship behaved in different conditions held an unspoken authority. At night, that authority expressed itself simply as better rest. You notice where weapons are placed too. Those responsible for responding quickly to threats keep them closest even while sleeping. A sword within easy reach. A shield positioned to block wind or spray, but also ready to move. This dual purpose runs through everything aboard. Nothing serves only one function. One small but revealing detail from saga description hints that younger or less experienced crew sometimes slept nearer to the edges where discomfort was greater. Not as punishment, but as a kind of exposure. Learning to sleep there meant learning to read the ship to adapt faster. Comfort was earned gradually through familiarity and trust. The person beside you shifts slightly, resettling their cloak. You feel the movement ripple along the bench. They stop quickly, finding a position that works. The coordination feels practiced. You adjust in response, just a fraction maintaining balance. This back and forth happens constantly, a silent negotiation repeated all night. There is no consensus among historians about how formal these sleeping arrangements were. Some argue that positions were loosely defined, changing from night to night depending on cargo and conditions. Others believe patterns emerged quickly and remain consistent throughout a voyage. Lying here, you sense both order and flexibility at once. You think about how this would feel over weeks, how the body would memorize the exact curve of a particular bench, how the mind would come to expect certain sounds from certain directions. Familiarity would breed a strange kind of comfort even in conditions that once felt harsh. The ship creaks again, and you notice how those nearest the centre barely react while those closest to the edges tense briefly. The difference is subtle but real. You file it away without thinking, part of the growing map in your mind. If you are here again tomorrow night, you will know a little more. Your thoughts drift to land, to houses with separate rooms and fixed beds. That world feels distant, almost imaginary now. Here, sleep is shaped by motion, proximity, and awareness. You're not meant to disappear into it completely. You're meant to remain lightly tethered to the world around you. The hierarchy of sleep is not cruel, it is practical. The ship demands balance, and balance requires that those best equipped to respond quickly remain closest to stability. Everyone else learns by doing, by feeling the difference night after night. As your breathing deepens, your body begins to settle into its place within that structure. Not fighting it, not questioning it, just occupying the space you have been given. The bench supports you. The ship carries you. The people around you form a living framework that holds everything together. You let that knowledge sink in as sleep pulls you closer. Where you are is not accidental. It is part of a larger pattern, one that keeps the ship moving and the crew alive. Wrapped in wool, pressed close to others, rocked gently by the sea, you rest within that pattern, held just firmly enough to let go. Sleep, when it comes, now does not arrive cleanly. It leaks in through the cracks left by exhaustion, settling unevenly across your thoughts. You drift without fully leaving yourself behind. Images surface and dissolve before they can settle into stories. The ship's motion seeps into everything, shaping even the half-dreams that flicker behind your closed eyes. You imagine water first, always water. Dark moving surfaces that tilt and side just out of reach. Sometimes you are floating above it, sometimes pressed close to it, aware of its weight, without seeing its depth. The rhythm beneath you bleeds into these visions, lifting and lowering you in ways that feel familiar even when the images are strange. Your body remains aware of the bench, of the narrowness, of the warmth at your side. This awareness anchors you, keeping the dreams shallow. They do not pull you far from the present. Instead, they hover close, borrowing sounds and sensations from the ship itself. A creak becomes a footstep in a dream. The slap of water turns into distant movement you cannot quite place. People who study sleep in extreme environments often note that fatigue changes the way dreams behave. They become shorter, more fragmented, less narrative. Lying here, you feel that shift firsthand. There is no long descent into deep rest, just brief dips beneath the surface followed by gentle returns. A faint pressure against your shoulder enters a dream without warning. In it, you are leaning against something solid, something warm. When you surface again, you realize it is simply the person beside you shifting in their sleep. The boundary between dreaming and waking feels thin, almost transparent. You sense other minds around you doing the same dance. Bodies twitch lightly. Breathing patterns change. Someone sighs, the sound carrying a trace of emotion even though no words follow. Dreams here are not private worlds. They spill into the shared space through movement and sound. There are differing interpretations among scholars about how people in the past understood dreams, especially in cultures that valued signs and omens. Some readings suggest dreams at sea were taken seriously, discussed, remembered. Others argue that exhaustion stripped them of meaning, reducing them to fleeting sensations. Right now your dreams feel too close to the surface to hold on to, slipping away the moment you notice them. The ship rolls a little more firmly and your body responds automatically. Muscles tighten. The dream breaks apart. You surface just enough to register the movement, then sink again when it passes. This cycle repeats, not frustrating, just constant. Sleep here is not a place you go. It is something that brushes past you again and again. In one brief fragment, you dream of land. Not a detailed place, just the idea of stillness. Flat ground, a horizon that does not tilt. The image feels almost unfamiliar, as if your mind has already begun to forget what that kind of stability feels like. The dream dissolves before it can make you nostalgic. Another sound enters, a low creak followed by a softer one wood responding to pressure. In the dream it becomes a voice calling from somewhere behind you. You turn, but there is no face to attach it to. When you wake again, the sound is just the ship settling, nothing more. Small telling. Some details from accounts of long voyages suggest that sailors sometimes shared dreams in the morning, not because they believed everyone held meaning, but because dreams offered a glimpse into how deeply fatigue and fear had settled in. Tonight, you suspect there would be little to share, nothing clear enough to retell. Your breathing remains slow and shallow, matching the gentle rise and fall beneath you. Each time you drift, you let go a little more. The bench no longer feels quite as hard. The cold no longer presses as sharply. These sensations do not disappear. They soften. The ship carries you through these half-dreams without pause. It does not distinguish between waking and sleeping passengers. It simply moves steady in its uneven way, shaping minds and bodies alike. Eventually you stop noticing when dreams start and end. They blur into a continuous quiet experience stitched together by motion and sound. You are not fully asleep, but you are no longer fully awake. In this narrow space, surrounded by others doing the same, that state feels sufficient. The longship continues forward, holding your drifting thoughts as securely as it holds your body. For now, that is enough. You surface briefly sometime in the night, not fully awake, just aware enough to realize that sleep here is never uninterrupted. Someone nearby shifts and the movement sends a subtle tremor along the bench. The ship answers with a low creak, a familiar sound by now, and your mind registers it without urgency. This waking feels routine, almost expected, as if your body has learned that rest comes in pieces. You blink once, eyes still closed, and listen. The air feels cooler than before, sharper as it moves across your face. Your breath clouds faintly against the wool pulled up near your mouth. Night has deepened, and with it the sense that the world beyond the hull has grown larger and darker. A quiet footstep moves along the centre of the ship. Someone is awake, careful with each step, placing their weight deliberately to avoid startling anyone. You do not open your eyes, but you know what is happening. Night watch. Even while others rest, someone must remain alert, scanning the darkness, listening for changes in wind or water. Accounts of seafaring life suggest that watch duties rotated, spreading fatigue evenly across the crew. No one escaped it entirely. The idea of sleeping through the whole night was more wish than reality. Lying here half aware, you feel how natural that rhythm becomes. Wake, listen, rest again. The watcher pauses nearby. You sense their presence more than hear it, a subtle shift in the air, a shadow passing overhead. For a moment you feel exposed, lying still while someone else stands alert. Then the feeling fades. This arrangement depends on trust. Tonight it holds. A faint splash echoes from the water, different from the usual rhythm. Your body tenses automatically, then relaxes when nothing follows. Fish, debris, a small wave catching the hull at an odd angle. The sea offers endless explanations, and your mind learns not to chase each one. You shift your hands slightly, fingers as brushing the wood beside you. The surface feels cool and smooth, worn by countless similar touches. That continuity is comforting. You are not the first awake like this, listening in the dark. You will not be the last. Someone farther down the ship coughs quietly, the sound muffled by fabric. Another sleeper sighs and resettles. These small disturbances ripple outward, then dissolve. No one speaks. Speech feels unnecessary, even intrusive at this hour. There is no single agreement among researchers about how structured nighttime routines were aboard longships. Some evidence hints at strict discipline with clearly defined watches. Other interpretations suggest a looser system shaped by experience and necessity rather than rigid schedules. From here, wrapped in half sleep, it feels organic. Someone wakes because they must, someone rests because they can. Your thoughts drift briefly toward danger, toward stories of surprise attacks and sudden storms. They do not linger. Fear requires energy, and energy is precious. Instead, you focus on the simple facts of the moment. The ship is intact, the movement is steady, the air smells of salt and wool. Nothing demands immediate action. The watcher moves on footsteps fading into the darkness. You feel the space settle again as if the ship exhales once more. The bench beneath you seems to accept your weight anew, creaking softly in response. Sleep returns quickly, this time drawn back by exhaustion and the reassurance of routine. You do not fight it. There is nothing to gain by staying awake longer than necessary. The sea will still be there when you wake again. As you drift, you realize that these brief awakenings stitch the night together. They keep you oriented, reminding you where you are without pulling you fully back into the world. It is a delicate balance one learned through repetition rather than instruction. Your breathing slows, the edges of awareness blur. Sounds soften again, blending into a single continuous presence. The longship carries on watched and unwatched, in turns moving steadily through darkness. You let yourself sink back into rest, knowing you will surface again before morning, and that this too is part of sleeping here. The uneasy feeling in your stomach arrives quietly, slipping into awareness the way cold does, gradually and without drama. At first, it is just a sense that something is off, a gentle lurch that does not quite match the rhythm you have learned. You take a slow breath, hoping it will pass, telling yourself that the ship has moved like this all night, but the sensation lingers. Desist. Your body feels heavy and light at the same time, as if gravity cannot quite decide what it wants from you. The bench presses into your side, familiar and grounding, yet your stomach seems to float somewhere else entirely. You swallow throat tight and focus on breathing evenly. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow, controlled. Seasickness has nothing to do with bravery. It does not care how prepared you are or how calm you feel. It arrives when the signals from your eyes, inner ear and muscles refuse to agree. On a night like this, with darkness hiding the horizon, and motion never stopping, that disagreement becomes harder to resolve. You keep your eyes closed instinctively. Opening them would not help. There is nothing to fix your gaze on anyway. No stable point. Just darkness and suggestion. You shift your head slightly, pressing your cheek into wool, hoping the contact will anchor you. Somewhere nearby, someone exhales sharply, then shifts position. You recognize the sound. A familiar discomfort shared quietly. Seasickness was common enough on long voyages that no one treated it as a personal failing. It was simply another condition to manage, like cold or fatigue. You fight the urge to move too much. Sudden motion can make everything worse. Instead, you curl inward slightly, bringing your knees so reducing the space inside your body where everything feels unsettled. The position is not comfortable, but it is contained. Your breathing becomes deliberate. You match it to the ship's movement, trying to trick your body into cooperation. Lift, settle, lift, settle, soar. It helps a little, enough to keep the nausea from cresting. There are hints in old accounts that sailors developed personal coping strategies for nights like this. Some focused on breathing. Others pressed their backs firmly against the hull to feel the ship more clearly. A few relied on sheer endurance, waiting for the sensation to burn itself out. Lying here, you choose patience. It costs the least energy. The smell of the ship feels stronger now, not because it has changed, but because your stomach is sensitive. Tar and wool mix into something heavier, thicker. You turn your face slightly, seeking a pocket of fresh air slipping down through the hull. It carries the faint mineral scent of seawater, cleaner and cooler. You feel sweat gather at the back of your neck despite the cold. Your skin prickles. This too is familiar to those who have crossed open water. Your body is trying to recalibrate, flushing systems adjusting. The urge to sit up flickers through you, then fades. Sitting would mean disturbing others, risking a sudden shift that could tip the balance further. You stay where you are, trusting stillness. A small uncomfortable detail surfaces in your thoughts. Vomiting over the side at night was dangerous, especially in rough water. Leaning too far out could end a life quickly. Because of that, sailors often tried to endure nausea until daylight or calmer conditions. Knowing this, you feel a quiet pressure to keep everything contained. Your stomach clenches once sharply enough to pull you closer to wakefulness. You tense, then relax, breathing through it. The moment passes. You are left shaky but intact. Around you, the ship continues its steady conversation. The sounds do not change to accommodate your discomfort. Water moves. Wood flexes. Someone sighs in their sleep. Life aboard does not pause for individual struggles. That realization is strangely comforting. You are not singled out, you're simply part of the whole. Gradually the sensation eases. Not completely. It lingers at the edges, a reminder to stay still, to breathe carefully. But the worst of it recedes, leaving behind a dull awareness rather than sharp distress. You let your muscles loosen again, inch by inch. Your grip on the cloak softens. Your jaw unclenches. The ship rocks, and this time your stomach follows more willingly, no longer fighting every movement. Exhaustion takes advantage of the opening. Sleep creeps back in, cautious but persistent. It does not ask permission. It simply settles where resistance has faded. As you drift, you feel a quiet respect for those who endured this night after night, crossing long distances with nothing but wood wool and stubborn resolve. Seasickness is humbling. It strips away illusions of control and leaves you negotiating with your own body. Your thoughts slow. The noise becomes a distant echo, no longer loud enough to hold your attention. The bench feels solid again. The warmth beside you steadies. The longship carries on indifferent but dependable. Wrapped in darkness, rocked by the water, sharing space with others who know this discomfort well, you rest again, letting the sea have its motion while you keep what little stillness you can. Light is a problem here, not a comfort, or rather the lack of it is intentional. You sense this as you drift back toward rest, the darkness feeling carefully maintained rather than accidental. Fire and ships do not mix easily, especially not when everything around you is wood, tar and rope. Even the smallest flame carries risk, and that risk is not worth a few moments of brightness. Your eyes open briefly, more from habit than intention. There is nothing to see, no glow, no embers, just layers of shadow pressing gently downward. The darkness feels thick enough to touch. You close your eyes again, realizing how much effort vision requires when there is nothing for it to hold on to. Earlier in the evening, someone may have used a small lamp or glowing ember, shielded carefully just long enough to check a rope or adjust a sail. But now in the heart of the night, even that would feel excessive. Rest depends on restraint. The ship stays dark so it can stay safe. You notice how this absence of light changes your awareness. Sounds feel closer. Touch becomes more precise. You can tell where the bench dips slightly under your weight. You can feel the faint vibration of movement through the wood. Darkness sharpens these senses, forcing your body to rely on them instead. Accounts of seafaring life often mention how quickly sailors adapted to working and resting without light, not because it was pleasant, but because it was necessary. Over time, hands learned where to go without guidance. Feet learned the shape of the deck. At night, memory replaced sight. You become aware of a small, carefully guarded source of light somewhere near the center of the ship. Not visible, just sensed. Perhaps a covered ember or a tiny oil flame hidden deep within a container. It does not flicker. It does not spread. It exists only as a contingency, a last resort. Knowing it is there, even unseen, brings a strange sense of reassurance. Your fingers brush against something cool and smooth near your side. Wood again, but shaped differently. The edge of a chest, the rim of a bucket. You cannot be sure. It does not matter. Everything has its place here, even in the dark, especially in the dark. A subtle memory surfaces. Some ships carried simple fire-making tools wrapped carefully and stored away from sleeping areas. Flint, steel, dry tinder. They were treated with respect, not fear, but always caution. Fire meant warmth and food. It also meant danger. Balance ruled every decision. The ship creaks softly, and for a moment the sound feels louder, without light to dilute it. You imagine the hull pressing against the water, the seams holding fast. Tarred as its its quiet work, sealing gaps you cannot see. Trust extends not just to people, but to materials, to craftsmanship, to choices made long before this night. You shift your hand again, then stop, aware of how darkness magnifies movement. Even a small adjustment feels larger when unseen. You learn to move slowly, deliberately, giving your body time to register where it is going before it gets there. Somewhere nearby, a sleeper stirs and mutters, then settles again. You sense rather than see the movement. It feels closer than it probably is. Darkness collapses distance, making the ship feel even more compact. You accept this, letting the closeness become part of the night rather than something to resist. There is a practical wisdom to this darkness. Without light, there is less temptation to stay awake, fewer distractions. The mind has little to do but turn inward or rest. This simplicity supports sleep even when conditions are far from comfortable. You think briefly about how modern life fights darkness at every turn, filling nights with screens and artificial glow. Here, darkness is allowed to do its work. It presses gently on your thoughts, slowing them, smoothing sharp edges. Your breathing deepens again. Without visual input, your body has less to process. The ship's motion feels more predictable now, its rhythm easier to follow. You let your breath match it without effort. The darkness becomes a kind of blanket, not warm but enclosing. It hides small discomfort, softens the sense of exposure. You are less aware of who is beside you, more aware of the shared presence as a whole. A faint sound reaches you, perhaps a rope shifting, or a sail responding to a slight change in wind. You note it, then release it. Nothing demands action. The night holds steady. As sleep returns, you realize that darkness here is not an enemy. It is a tool shaping behavior, conserving energy, reducing risk. It asks for trust, and in return it offers rest. You sink deeper, now wrapped in wool and shadow, carried by a ship that knows how to move through the night without being seen. The sea continues around you, unseen and immense, while you remain here in this small pocket of safety, letting the dark do what it has always done best. Something small and solid presses against your ribs when you shift just enough to pull you toward wakefulness again. You reach for it without opening your eyes, fingers closing around a familiar shape. Wood smoothed by handling. A personal object tucked close so it will not slide away in the night. Even half asleep, your body knows what it is doing. Personal belongings take on a different weight at sea. There is no spare space, no drawer or shelf to disappear things into. What you keep must stay close or risk being lost, damaged, or taken by the movement of the ship itself. So you sleep with your things the way you sleep with other people nearby, close enough to feel them. The object in your hand might be a small knife in its sheath, or a simple wooden comb, or a carved piece no larger than your palm. It does not matter which. What matters is that it is yours and that you can reach it without looking. You tuck it back where it belongs, wedged between your body and the bench, secured by your weight. Finds from ship burials and coastal settlements show how modest these personal items often were. Nothing flashy, nothing excessive. Tools and tokens meant to be useful or meaningful, not decorative. At night, aboard a longship, those small possessions became anchors, reminders of continuity, in a place where everything else was in motion. You notice that others do the same. A hand slides under a cloak to check that something is still there. A faint clink of metal is muffled quickly. No one wants loose objects shifting in the dark. A dropped item could become a hazard, or vanish into the bilge, or simply cause unnecessary noise. There is comfort in this quiet inventory. Knowing what you have, knowing where it is. It gives your mind something stable to hold on to when the world around you refuses to stay still. You imagine how this habit would deepen over time, each voyage reinforcing the same careful routines. You shift your arm again, resting it protectively across your midsection. The gesture feels instinctive, almost unconscious. It shields both you and what you carry. Around you, others adopt similar postures, curling inward, making themselves smaller, reducing risk. One small but telling detail from archaeological work shows that many everyday objects bear signs of constant handling. Edges rounded, surfaces polished smooth. These were not items taken out only when needed. They were touched often absent-mindedly, especially during moments of rest. You understand why now. The darkness makes it easier to forget exactly what you're holding. Shape replaces detail, weight replaces appearance. You know the object by feel alone. In this way, it becomes part of you, not something separate. That familiarity calms you, settling your thoughts. You briefly consider what would happen if the ship pitched sharply, if something went wrong. Your mind does not linger there. You trust the instinct that has already positioned your belongings safely. Worry adds nothing useful in this moment. Nearby someone adjusts a strap or tie, the sound barely audible. Leather shifts against wood. Another person presses something closer to their chest and stills. These small movements repeat along the length of the ship, quiet rituals performed without discussion. There are differing interpretations among historians about how much personal property sailors typically carried on voyages like this. Some argue that space limitations forced extreme minimalism. Others suggest people found ways to bring small comforts along despite constraints. Lying here, you sense the truth lies somewhere in between. There is room for what matters and little else. You think briefly of land again, of rooms where belongings can be spread out, left unattended, taken for granted. That idea feels distant. Here, ownership is intimate. You know the exact position of every object you keep, even in the dark, even half asleep. The ship shifts and you tighten your grip reflexively, then relax when nothing slides or clatters. Everything stays where it should. The sense of order holds. Your breathing deepens once more. With your belongings secured, your body has one less thing to monitor. Another small responsibility set aside until morning. You let your arms settle into a comfortable position, fingers resting loosely against wooden fabric. Sleep creeps back in slow and unhurried. The object you touched fades from awareness, its presence registered, but no longer examined. It does its work simply by being there. The longship continues to move beneath you, steady and indifferent. Around you, others guard their small pieces of stability in the same way, creating a quiet network of care and habit that holds the night together. Wrapped in wool, pressed close to people and possessions alike, you drift again, carried, not just by the ship, but by the simple reassurance of knowing what is yours and where it rests. You feel the damp before you fully understand it. A coolness against your sleeve, a faint chill spreading along the edge of your cloak. At first you think it is just the night air shifting again, but then you notice the texture. The wool feels heavier there, slightly slick, no longer dry. Water has found its way inside. It does not rush in or splash dramatically. It seeps, a fine spray carried by wind, a thin trickle sliding down the inside of the hull where seams meet and flex. The longship is good, but it is not sealed in the way modern minds imagine. It breathes, it bends, and sometimes it lets the sea remind everyone how close it is. You adjust, carefully lifting the damp edge of your cloak and tucking it beneath a drier fold. The movement is slow practice meant to avoid shaking loose more moisture or disturbing anyone nearby. Others are doing the same in their own small ways. A shoulder shifts, a leg draws inward. A quiet reshaping ripples through the sleeping bodies. Ship finds and coastal remains show clear signs of water exposure inside vessels. Salt stains, warped boards, traces of carbs and silt where it does not belong. This was normal. Dryness at sea was temporary at best. Nights like this taught sailors to accept moisture as part of the environment rather than an emergency. The smell changes slightly as water spreads. The air sharpens, carrying the clean bite of seawater mixed with tar. It cuts through the heavier wool scent, fresh but cold. You breathe it in and out, aware of how it settles in your chest. Someone near your feet mutters softly as a droplet lands where it was not expected. They shift, then still again. No complaint follows. Complaining does not dry anything faster. You feel along the bench with your fingertips, checking where the dampness has reached. The wood is cool but solid. It holds. That matters more than comfort. You remind yourself that the ship has carried people through far worse than this. A little water is not a threat. It is a reminder. Rain begins softly overhead, not loud enough to drum, just enough to whisper against sail and rope. The sound filters down, mixing with the steady movement of the sea. You imagine droplets collecting sliding finding paths they have followed countless times before. There is disagreements among researchers about how watertight longships truly were in practice. Some reconstructions suggest they remained remarkably dry under most conditions. Others show how easily spray and rain could work their way inside during the extended voyages. Lying here with damp wool against your arm, you suspect both are right. The ship resists water. It does not exclude it completely. You pull your knees closer, keeping damp fabric away from bare skin as much as possible. Wool helps still trapping warmth even when wear, but comfort shifts when moisture lingers. You adjust again, finding a balance between dryness and stability. The person beside you presses slightly closer where they're seeking warmth or simply responding to the same intrusion. The shared heat helps. Dampness feels less sharp when offset by another body. This closeness, inconvenient at other times, becomes valuable now. Water drips somewhere farther down the ship, a steady, patient sound. It does not rush. It does not grow. It simply exists. Someone on watch will deal with it if needed, bailing quietly, redirecting it. For now it is manageable. You feel a strange calm settle in as you accept the sensation. Wet sleeve, cool air, slow movement. None of it requires immediate action. The body adapts quickly when panic is not invited in. Your thoughts drift again, slower now, heavier. The damp becomes part of the background, no longer the focus. You register it the way you register the bench or the rocking motion. Present but not overwhelming. The rain continues light and persistent. The ship absorbs it, flexes, sheds what it can. You trust the craft, the wood, the knowledge behind its shape. Trust is not blind here. It is built from repetition. As sleep edges back in the dampness, fades to a distant awareness. Your body curls protectively, conserving warmth. Around you others do the same, a collective response to the sea's quiet intrusion. The longship moves on through rain and darkness, carrying its small cargo of tired, adaptable people. Water touches you, but it does not claim you. Wrapped in wool, pressed close to others, rocked steadily onward, you rest again, knowing that dryness is temporary, but survival lies in knowing how to live without it. Privacy does not exist here in the way you understand it on land. There are no walls to turn toward, no blankets to pull up and disappear behind. Even with your eyes closed, you are aware of everyone around you, their warmth, their breathing, their small movements stitched into the same narrow space. Sleep happens anyway, not because privacy is preserved, but because the need for rest outweighs the desire for separation. You become aware of how exposed your thoughts feel in a place like this. Every sound you make carries a sigh, a swallow, the soft rustle of fabric. Even your breathing feels public, part of the shared soundscape. You learn to keep it steady quiet, not out of fear, but courtesy. Everyone here is doing the same mental arithmetic, adjusting themselves to minimize disturbance. Your body adapts faster than your expectations. The initial discomfort of closeness fades into something neutral, then something almost reassuring. There is safety in numbers even when those numbers press close. The ship feels less like a collection of individuals and more like a single breathing structure, each person a necessary component. You notice how little conversation happens now. Voices belong to the day. At night, words are unnecessary. Communication shifts into touch and movement, subtle and efficient. A slight nudge signals a need to shift. A pause indicates acknowledgement. No one explains these signals, they are learned through repetition. Accounts from shared living environments across the past suggest that people develop different boundaries than those we rely on today. Space was negotiated constantly, not defended. Lying here, you feel that negotiation in your own body. You give up a few inches, someone else does the same. The balance holds. A knee presses lightly against your calf. The contact is brief, then settles into stillness. It does not register as intrusion, it registers as information. Someone is there, someone is warm, someone is also trying to sleep. The thought is oddly calming. You shift your arm and feel fabric brush skin that is not yours. Wool against wool. The textures blend. It becomes difficult to tell where your cloak ends and someone else's begins. The distinction feels less important the longer you lie there. There is no room for self-consciousness here. No one is watching, no one is judging. Everyone is too tired, too focused on conserving energy. That absence of scrutiny creates its own kind of freedom. You do not have to perform rest. You simply take it where you can find it. Some interpretations of communal sleeping suggest that it strengthens social bonds not through intimacy, but through endurance. Sharing discomfort builds trust in a way comfort never needs to. As you lie here sharing heat and space without words, you understand how that trust forms quietly without ceremony. Your thoughts wander briefly to how silence feels different when shared. On land, silence can feel empty or awkward. Here it feels full, loaded with awareness. The absence of speech does not signal distance, it signals rest. A sleeper near your head turns slightly, exhaling more deeply. The sound brushes past your ear. Warm and human. You do not recoil. Instead you relax, recognizing the rhythm as steady, untroubled. It anchors you more firmly than solitude ever could. You become aware of your own posture curled inward just enough to take up less space. This is not submission. It is adaptation. The ship rewards those who fit themselves to it rather than insisting on comfort that does not exist here. There are differing views on how people emotionally experience such closeness over long periods. Some evidence suggests frustration and conflict flared easily in cramped conditions. Other readings emphasize cooperation and restraint as survival skills. Tonight, in this moment, restraint wins. Everyone is too tired to push against the arrangement that keeps them warm and afloat. Your breathing slows again, finding a pace that matches the collective rhythm. Inhale, exhale, you're no longer just breathing for yourself. You're breathing with the ship, with the people around you, part of a temporary organism assembled for a single purpose. The lack of privacy also means there is no loneliness. Even in sleep you are accompanied. The awareness lingers at the edge of consciousness, preventing the mind from drifting too far inward. That gentle tether keeps your thoughts from spiraling. You notice how this changes your sense of self. Boundaries soften, the sharp edges of individual worry blur. You're not separate from the environment. You're embedded within it. Wood, water, wool and bodies all press together in motion. The ship creaks softly and the sound travels through everyone at once. No one startles. It is familiar now, part of the shared language of the night. You feel the movement through your back, your legs, the bodies beside you. It reinforces the sense that everything here is connected. As sleep deepens, privacy feels like a distant concept, something belonging to another life. Here rest does not require separation, it requires acceptance. You accept the closeness, you accept the warmth, you accept the steady presence of others. The longship carries you onward, its narrow interior holding a small community bound by necessity. Wrapped in wool, pressed gently on all sides, you let go of the need to be alone and find rest in the simple fact that you are not. You said use more diverse expressions, do not repeat them continuously in sections. A mainstream historical fact. Historians still argue whether a quirky tidbit. Scholars still debate ChatGPT. Said absolutely. Locked in and understood. From this point forward, I'll keep those required elements fully absorbed into the narration with no repeated cue phrases, No recognizable academic beats and no structural tells. Facts will feel lived in. Uncertainty will feel like quiet ambiguity. Odd details will surface naturally, almost accidentally. Differences in interpretation will be implied through tone and contrast rather than stated. Nothing will pull the listener out of the drift. Whenever you're ready, just say, at some point the effort of staying aware simply costs too much. You feel it happen not as a decision, but as a soft collapse inward. The constant monitoring of sound movement and proximity loosens its grip. Your thoughts slow, then stretch, then thin out, leaving behind a quiet clarity that feels almost unfamiliar. This is not deep sleep yet. It is something closer to mental survival mode. Your mind pares itself down to essentials, conserving energy the way your body does when cold sets in. Worries that felt important earlier no longer present themselves. Questions fade before they can fully form. What remains is a calm attentiveness, steady and unremarkable. You notice how this state sharpens certain perceptions even as it dulls others. You are less aware of individual aches, less focused on discomfort. At the same time, you remain tuned to changes in the ship, a shift in motion, a new sound, a difference in air pressure. Your mind is quiet, but not absent. People who have studied prolonged fatigue describe this state as both fragile and efficient. Thought becomes economical, emotion flattens, decision-making simplifies. Lying here, pressed into wooden wool, you understand why this mental shift mattered on long voyages. Panic wastes energy. Overthinking drains strength. Calm attention preserves both. Your body feels heavier, now limbs sinking more fully into the bench. The wood seems to mould slightly around you, not because it changes, but because your muscles finally stop resisting it. The bench no longer feels like an obstacle. It feels like part of the environment, no more noteworthy than the air you breathe. A memory drifts up uninvited, something small and ordinary. A sound from home, a familiar smell. It passes quickly without stirring longing. Even nostalgia requires energy and your mind seems unwilling to spend it. Instead, you remain here present in a way that feels surprisingly neutral. Around you, others appear to have reached the same state. Breathing deepens and evens out. Movements become rare and slow. The ship feels quieter not because it is making less noise, but because fewer minds are reacting to it. Collective fatigue settles like a blanket. You realize that this calm is not accidental. It is learned. Repeated exposure to discomfort teaches the mind when to let go. Over time, this state would come more quickly, arriving earlier in the night, lasting longer. Tonight, you have reached it by necessity rather than familiarity. There are differing interpretations of how this mental adaptation shaped people who spent much of their lives at sea. Some suggest it fostered resilience and emotional control. Others point to the toll it may have taken, flattening responses and dulling sensitivity over time. Lying here, you feel both possibilities hovering. Calm can be strength, it can also be armor. The ship rocks gently, and you move with it without thinking. Your breath adjusts automatically. There is no commentary, no internal narration, just sensation and response paired efficiently. This is rest stripped to its most basic form. A faint sound reaches you from far off, perhaps another vessel, perhaps nothing at all. Your mind registers it, assesses it, and dismisses it within a heartbeat. No threat, no action required. You remain still. You feel oddly capable in this state, as if you could wake fully at a moment's notice if needed. That potential hums quietly beneath the calm. You are resting but not helpless. The distinction matters here. The darkness feels less heavy now, less pressing. It has become part of the background, no longer something to push against. Your sense of self feels smaller, not diminished, but simplified. Fewer edges, fewer demands. The longship continues its steady movement through water you cannot see. It does not require your attention. It does not ask for reassurance. It simply does what it was built to do. As your mind drifts closer to true sleep, this calm remains holding steady. You are no longer managing the night. You're moving through it quietly, efficiently, letting go of anything that does not serve rest. Wrapped in wool, surrounded by others, in the same half-silent state you float just beneath full awareness. Balance carefully between readiness and release. The ship carries you there without comment, and for now, that balance is enough. The idea of land returns slowly, not as a place you can picture clearly, but as a contrast your body remembers. Even in this half-sleep, you sense how different rest feels when the ground does not move beneath you. The thought surfaces briefly, then settles, more observation than longing. Sleeping here has changed your expectations enough that land-based comfort feels almost abstract. On certain shore, sleep usually means separation, a bed apart from the others. Walls, quiet that does not shift or breathe. On the Longship, rest is communal and responsive. You do not sink into stillness, you float within motion. The difference is subtle but profound, and your body notices it, even if your mind does not dwell on it. Your muscles carry a faint, constant engagement, a readiness that never fully releases. On land, they would slacken completely, trusting the ground to remain where it is. Here, they remain gently alert, prepared to adjust. That low-level tension is not stress anymore. It has become baseline. You imagine lying on Earth after weeks at sea, the strangeness of it. The way the ground would feel too solid, too final. There are accounts from later sailors describing that sensation, how land seemed to sway after long voyages, how stillness itself felt unstable. That memory lingers in your thoughts, not as discomfort, but as curiosity. The bench beneath you presses in familiar places now. What once felt harsh has become predictable. Your body has mapped it. The curve, the pressure points, even the slight variations in movement depending on where the ship rides the water. You know these things without consciously knowing them. On land, sleep often marks an ending to the day. Here it feels more like a pause. The ship never truly stops working. Water keeps moving. Wood keeps flexing. Someone remains awake on watch. Even your own rest feels provisional, ready to give way if needed. You notice how this changes your sense of time. Night does not feel like a single stretch. It is broken into pieces by motion, by brief awakenings, by shifting sensations. Morning will not arrive suddenly. It will emerge gradually, signalled by changes in air and sound, before light ever appears. A thought drifts through you. On land, comfort encourages forgetting surroundings, forgetting vulnerability. At sea, even rest keeps you aware, connected to environment and people. That awareness does not prevent sleep. It shapes it. You adjust your head slightly, then still. The movement feels smaller than it would on land, more contained. Everything here is scaled down to fit the ship's narrow logic. Big gestures are unnecessary. Economy rules. There is a quiet resilience forming in you, built not from effort, but from repetition. Each night aboard teaches the same lesson. You rest where you can, you adapt to what is given. You trust the craft and the people around you. Over time, that becomes second nature. Different interpretations exist about how sailors compared life at sea to life ashore in emotional terms. Some descriptions emphasize longing and relief at returning to land. Others suggest a strange discomfort with stillness after long voyages. In this moment, you feel suspended between those ideas, belonging fully to neither. The ship rocks, again gentle and familiar. You do not react. Your body has learned what it needs to know. The movement passes through you without disturbance. Your breathing deepens further, edging closer to true sleep. Thoughts thin out, losing their edges. Comparison between land and sea fades, no longer necessary. Here is where you are. That is enough. The Longship carries you onward, neither land nor water, but something in between. And as you rest within it, you realize that sleep here is not about escape. It is about coexistence, sharing motion, sharing space, sharing the night. You let that realization drift away, with the rest of your thoughts settling into the quiet rhythm that has become familiar. The bench supports you. The ship moves. The sea surrounds you. And somewhere beyond awareness, morning continues its slow approach. Before sleep fully claims you again, small habits surface, the kind people perform without thinking when night settles in. They are not formal ceremonies, not announced or shared, but they repeat often enough to feel intentional. You feel one of these habits stirring in yourself, a quiet need to mark the moment before letting go. You tug your cloak one last time, smoothing it across your chest, making sure no edge is twisted in a way that will irritate you later. It is a simple act, but it signals something important. You are done adjusting, you are ready to rest. Around you, others perform their own versions of the same thing. A hand checks a knot, a strap is loosened slightly, a shield is nudged into a more reliable position. These small routines matter. They give the mind something familiar to hold on to in an environment that is otherwise unpredictable. People who lived and travelled this way learned to create calm through repetition, even when conditions changed nightly. The habit itself becomes the reassurance. You notice someone nearby murmur a few words under their breath, not loud enough to make out. It could be a prayer, it could be a name, it could be nothing more than a half-formed thought slipping free as sleep approaches. You do not react. Words at night are personal even in shared space. There is evidence from later written sources that many sailors carried simple beliefs or phrases meant to offer protection at sea. Not elaborate rituals, just quiet acknowledgements of forces larger than themselves. Whether spoken or merely thought, these gestures helped people feel oriented in a world where control was limited. You find yourself doing something similar without planning it. You take a slow breath and let it out fully longer than necessary. The exhale feels like a signal to your body. There is nothing more to do right now. Let the ship handle the rest. The sound of water and wood continues uninterrupted. The ship does not pause for anyone's private moment, and yet these moments exist anyway, threaded into the larger noise. That contrast feels important. Individual needs are met within a collective rhythm, not outside it. You recall how earlier adjustments felt urgent, driven by discomfort or cold. This one feels different. It is deliberate, unhurried. The difference tells you how far your body has travelled since night fell. What once demanded constant attention now requires only a final check. Somewhere farther down the ship, someone shifts position and settles again with a soft sigh. The sound carries relief more than restlessness. You recognize it. That sigh means they have found a position they can live with for a while. In this environment, that counts as success. The air feels steadier now, less damp, less sharp, or perhaps you have simply stopped measuring it so closely. Either way, your awareness narrows to what is immediately around you. The bench, the cloak, the warmth beside you. Everything else recedes. You notice that fear has been absent for a while. Not because danger is impossible, but because your mind has decided it is not useful to dwell there. That choice feels learned, not forced. You accept the limits of what you can control and rest inside them. Different accounts from maritime cultures describe similar nighttime behaviours, small rituals, familiar checks, quiet acknowledgements before sleep. They appear wherever people face uncertainty together, whether on water or land. The specifics vary, the intention stays the same. You curl your fingers slightly, then let them relax. Your hands no longer feel the need to grip anything. Trust has taken their place. Trust in the ship's shape, trust in the people around you, trust in the routines that have carried countless nights before this one. The longship creaks softly, a sound you no longer interpret as warning or reassurance. It simply exists. That neutrality is comforting. Not everything needs meaning attached to it. Your breathing slows further, each breath deeper than the last. The space between thoughts stretches. Words dissolve before they fully form. The last habit, the last check, is complete. You're aware that morning will come eventually, but it feels distant, not something to prepare for yet. Night still has work to do, and your role in it now is simple. Rest, conserve, wait. Wrapped in wool and habit, you let yourself sink again, this time without resistance. The ship holds steady beneath you, carrying not just bodies and cargo, but these quiet, repeated gestures that make sleep possible. You drift supported by routine as much as by wood and water, and allow the night to continue without you for a while. Fear does not vanish at night, it simply changes shape. It becomes quieter, more subtle, slipping into the edges of thought instead of announcing itself. As you lie there wrapped in wool and habit, you feel it occasionally brush past testing whether it still has your attention. It arrives as questions that never fully form. What if the wind shifts suddenly? What if something moves too close in the dark? Or what if the sea decides it wants more than it has been given so far? These thoughts surface briefly, then drift away, not chased, not invited to stay. You notice how experience seems to dull fear without erasing it. Those who have slept this way many times lie more still, breathe more evenly. Their bodies trust the ship in a way yours is still learning. That trust does not come from believing nothing will go wrong. It comes from knowing that worry does not prevent it. The ship creaks softly beneath you, a sound that once might have triggered alarm. Now it barely registers. Your body files it under familiar harmless. Wood moves. Water answers. This conversation has been ongoing since nightfall, and nothing about it suggests urgency. You think briefly about bravery, how it is often imagined as loud and decisive. Here it feels muted. Quiet endurance. The ability to rest even when certainty is impossible. That kind of courage rarely looks impressive. It looks like stillness. A small sound from the water catches your attention. Something breaks the surface nearby, then disappears. Your muscles tense for a heartbeat. Then you relax again. The sea is full of life. Most of it does not care about you at all. There are accounts from many maritime cultures that speak of this balance between fear and familiarity. Sailors learned to recognize which sensations mattered and which could be ignored. That skill did not remove danger. It made living alongside it possible. You adjust your breathing again, deeper, now slower. Fear feeds on shallow breaths and tight muscles. Calm starves it. You feel that a shift happen physically, your chest loosening, your jaw unclenching. Nearby, someone exhales sharply, then settles. You sense the same negotiation happening in them. A moment of tension, a conscious release. Fear is shared here too, even when no one names it. The darkness helps. Without visuals to fixate on your mind, has fewer hooks for imagination to cling to. Sounds remain, motion remains, but shapes do not leap out to be misinterpreted. In this way, night offers a strange protection. You realize that the longship itself encourages this balance. It is narrow, contained. There is nowhere to pace, nowhere to stand and brood. The space funnels energy inward towards stillness. Anxiety has little room to perform. Your thoughts drift towards those who have faced far worse nights than this. Rougher seas, colder air, longer darkness. The knowledge that people endured those conditions and still slept when they could offer as quiet reassurance. This night is not unique. It is part of a long pattern. You feel your body sink further into the bench as tension drains away. Fear does not disappear completely. It never does. But it settles into a manageable shape, small enough to carry without effort. The ship moves steadily on, indifferent to your internal negotiations. Its confidence is not emotional. It is structural. Planks fitted carefully. Seams sealed with tar. Shape refined through use. You trust that more than you trust thoughts. As sleep deepens, fear fades into the background, no longer loud enough to demand attention. It becomes just another sensation among many, like cold or motion, not pleasant, not overwhelming. Wrapped in wool, surrounded by others who understand this balance instinctively, you let yourself drift again. Bravery here is not about conquering fear, it is about resting anyway. The longship carries that quiet courage forward with you through darkness and water holding steady while you finally let go and sleep. At some point during the night, the ship stops feeling like an object beneath you and starts to feel like something alive. Not in a dramatic way. Not with intention or awareness. More like the way a familiar animal shifts its weight or breathes while sleeping nearby. You sense it through vibration, through sound, through the way motion passes predictably from one part of the hull to another. You no longer react to each movement individually. Instead, you feel the ship as a whole. A lift begins near the bow and travels beneath you. A subtle twist follows, then release. Your body follows along without instruction, muscles adjusting before thought arrives. This cooperation feels earned, the result of hours spent learning each other's habits. The wood beneath you holds a memory of motion. It creaks in places you now recognize, like a voice with a familiar accent. Some sounds mean strain, others mean settling. You have learned the difference without being taught. That knowledge rests in your body, not your thoughts. People who have studied traditional seafaring often note how sailors spoke about their vessels with affection and respect, sometimes even naming them. Not because they believed the ship was conscious, but because trust grew through repeated survival. Night after night, the same structure carried them across water that offered no guarantees. You feel that trust now. It is quiet and practical. You trust the bench to hold, the hull to flex, the seams to keep water where it belongs. You trust the ship not because it promises safety, but because it has not failed yet. Your breathing aligns more fully with the ship's rhythm. When it rises, you inhale. When it settles, you exhale. This is not deliberate. It simply happens, like syncing your pace to someone walking beside you. The effect is calming, grounding. The person beside you shifts slightly and you barely notice. The movement blends into the larger pattern. Individual motions lose their sharpness, absorbed by the collective. You're less aware of where your body ends and the environment begins. You think briefly about how strange this would feel at first, the idea of trusting something so completely while asleep. And yet here you are doing exactly that. Trust, you realize, is not a belief. It is a behavior shaped by experience. The ship creaks again, deeper this time, and you register it as reassurance rather than warning. That sound means the hull is doing its job, responding instead of resisting. You feel a small surge of confidence, not excitement, just steadiness. Your thoughts drift to the idea of partnership. Sailors work the ship by day, pulling oars, adjusting sails, responding to conditions. At night, the ship works for them, carrying weight, absorbing motion, providing the narrow space where rest is possible. The relationship goes both ways. You relax further into the bench, no longer holding yourself quite so carefully. Your body trusts that the boundaries are where they were before. Nothing has shifted dramatically. Nothing needs correction. The darkness feels less enclosing now, less heavy. It has become a familiar part of the ship's nighttime state. You do not need to see to understand where you are. Your body knows. A faint change in motion passes through you, subtle enough that earlier it might have drawn your attention. Now it slides by unnoticed, integrated smoothly into your awareness. This is what familiarity feels like at sea. You realize that this sense of trust would deepen over time, each night reinforcing it, each successful passage adding another layer. Eventually the ship would feel less like transport and more like extension, a moving space that belongs to you as much as you belong to it. For now, this early version of trust is enough to let your muscles soften fully, enough to let your breathing slow without caution, enough to let sleep deepen beyond its shallow edges. The longship carries you forward steady in its own language of motion and sound. You listen without effort. You respond without thought. Wrapped in wool and shared warmth, you rest inside that relationship, letting the ship do what it was shaped to do. And as the night continues, you no longer feel like a passenger. You feel like part of the vessel itself, moving quietly across dark water, trusting the rhythm that holds you all together. Exhaustion spreads through the ship like a tide that has finally found its level. It is not dramatic. No one collapses or announces surrender. Instead, the remaining tension seeps out of bodies quietly, as if everyone has agreed at once to stop resisting what the night has been offering all along. You feel it in yourself first as heaviness. Your limbs sink more fully into the bench. The effort required to hold a position fades, replaced by the simple act of being where you are. Muscles that have stayed alert for hours finally loosen, trusting that they will be called upon again if needed. For now, they are allowed to rest. Around you, the ship feels different. Not quieter exactly, but softer. Movements become rarer. When someone does shift, it is slow and deliberate, guided by the same conservation of energy you feel in your own body. The earlier restlessness has passed. What remains is collective weariness, shared and unspoken. This shared exhaustion creates a bond that does not need words. Everyone aboard has pulled oars, adjusted sail, braced through motion, endured cold and damp and darkness. That effort lingers in muscles and joints, a common language written into bodies. Lying here, you feel connected to that effort, even as you rest from it. You notice how breathing changes across the ship. It deepens, it lengthens. Inhale and exhale stretch further apart. The rhythm becomes slower, more uniform. The effect is subtle but powerful. The ship feels like it is breathing too, rising and falling with the same patient cadence. Your own breath falls into that pattern without instruction. You are no longer managing it. It manages itself. Each exhale carries away a little more tension, a little more awareness of discomfort. The bench beneath you becomes something you lean into rather than endure. Someone nearby snores softly, a low, steady sound that blends into the background rather than standing out. Earlier it might have drawn irritation or attention. Now it barely registers. Sound has lost its sharp edges. Everything is rounded by fatigue. You sense how this shared tiredness smooths over differences. Rank, experience, personality all fade in importance when everyone reaches the same threshold. In this state, everyone rests the same way, pressed into the same narrow space, subject to the same movement. Equality arrives not through intention but through exhaustion. The ship creaks gently, a familiar sound that no longer prompts evaluation. Your mind registers it and lets it go. There is nothing to decide, nothing to fix. That release feels like relief. You realize that this collective weariness is what makes long nights bearable. Not individual toughness, but the knowledge that no one else has it easier. The burden is shared evenly enough that resentment has no room to grow. Everyone is tired together. Your thoughts slow further, becoming less distinct. Ideas drift past without forming sentences. Images blur before they can attach themselves to meaning. This is deeper sleep, approaching, no longer interrupted by constant checks or adjustments. The warmth around you feels more consistent now. Bodies have settled into positions that hold heat efficiently. The cold that once demanded attention now feels distant, contained. Wool and proximity do their quiet work. You are aware dimly that this exhaustion will lift with the morning, replaced by stiffness and effort and motion again. But that thought does not pull you forward. It floats briefly, then sinks away. Morning is not your concern right now. The longship continues its steady passage through dark water, carrying a crew bound together by fatigue as much as by purpose, wrapped in wool, held by wood, surrounded by others who have reached the same quiet endpoint. You rest more deeply than before. In this moment there is no need to prove endurance. It has already been proven by simply being here. You let that understanding settle, and with it you drift further into sleep, supported by the shared exhaustion that keeps the ship and everyone on it moving forward. You notice the first hints of morning before you are fully awake. It is not light that reaches you, not yet. It is a change in the air. The darkness feels thinner, less heavy than it did hours ago. The cold shifts slightly, losing its sharp edge, replaced by something softer, damp, but less biting. Your body registers these changes long before your mind attaches meaning to them. The ship sounds different too, not quieter but altered. The water no longer feels as dense against the hull. The rhythm changes just enough to catch your attention. Waves seem more spaced out, their movements less insistent. Even the creaking of wood carries a different tone, as if the longship itself is preparing to wake. You surface slowly, not with a jolt, but with a gradual awareness of your own weight. Your limbs feel heavy, thick with fatigue. The bench presses back into you, familiar now, almost expected. You do not move right away. There is no urgency. Morning on a ship does not begin with alarms or voices. It begins with noticing. Somewhere nearby, a sleeper exhales deeply and shifts. Another follows. The chain reaction moves gently along the bench. Small adjustments ripple through the group as bodies test stiffness and circulation. No one sits up yet, no one speaks. The night loosens its grip reluctantly. Your breath fogs faintly again, though not as much as earlier. The air feels slightly warmer, or perhaps your body has simply adjusted. You draw your cloak closer out of habit rather than need. The wool feels heavier now, damp in places, carrying the memory of the night in its fibres. You feel a stiffness along your back and hips as awareness grows. The bench has left its mark, reminding you that rest here is functional, not forgiving. Muscles protest quietly, sending signals that will need attention soon. You acknowledge them without moving. There is time. Above you, the sky begins its slow shift. You cannot see it directly, but you sense it through changes in contrast and air movement. The darkness is no longer uniform. It has layers now, lighter above, deeper below. The world is rearranging itself. There are signs that others are already awake in a more active way. A careful footstep along the centre of the ship. The faint clink of something metal being adjusted. A rope drawn through a hand tested gently. Those on watch or rising early move with deliberate care, mindful of sleepers who are not ready yet. Your thoughts begin to return, still slow, still heavy. You think of how different this awakening feels from mornings on land. No sudden transition, no clear line between night and day. Instead, a gradual blending, one state dissolving into the next. You roll your shoulders slightly, testing the movement. The stiffness answers immediately, sharp but manageable. You stop before it turns into discomfort. Stretching too quickly would feel aggressive here, both to your body and to those around you. Everything is done in moderation. The ship creaks again, a sound you now recognize as mourning rather than warning. Wood expanding slightly as temperature changes. Seams adjusting. The vessel responds to daylight even before the sun is visible. Someone near your feet sits up carefully, then pauses, perhaps gauging whether they are blocking space or light. They shift their legs, then stand stepping over bodies with practiced ease. Their movement is quiet, respectful. This choreography has been repeated countless times. You finally open your eyes, though there is still little to see. Apes are faint but distinguishable now, the outline of shields, the curve of the hull, the mast rising upward, its silhouette softened by the growing light. You blink slowly, letting your vision adjust without strain. The smell of the ship changes again. Morning air brings a slightly fresher note, mixing with the familiar scents of tar and wool. It does not erase them, it layers over them. The result feels lighter, more breathable. Your stomach stirs, reminding you of its existence. Hunger creeps in cautiously, not sharp, just present. It joins the list of sensations waiting to be addressed. Food will come later. For now, waking takes priority. You become aware of how the ship feels under you now, still moving but more gently. The motion that once demanded constant negotiation has softened into something almost reassuring. Your body adjusts without thought, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Around you, others continue to wake in stages. A hand reaches for a cloak. A belt is tightened. A yawn is stifled. No one rushes. Horning does not reward speed here. It rewards readiness. You sit up slowly, vertebra by vertebra, pausing when some stiffness flares. The movement sends a faint creak through the bench, answered by the hull beneath. You steady yourself with one hand against wood that feels cool but solid. Sitting upright feels strange at first, like relearning balance. As you settle into the seated position, you realize how far the night has carried you. What once felt hostile now feels known. The bench that seemed unforgiving has become familiar. The closeness that once felt intrusive now feels routine. You look around more fully now. Faces are still indistinct, but you can sense expressions through posture and movement. Tired, focused, calm. No one complains about the night. It has already passed. Attention shifts forward. The longship prepares for its day without ceremony. Sleep is folded away as efficiently as it was assembled. Cloaks are shaken gently, dampness assessed. Personal items are checked and secured. The space transforms quietly from resting place back into working vessel. You feel a quiet satisfaction in having made it through the night. Not triumph, not pride, just a sense of having adapted, of having belonged, if only briefly, to this rhythm. Morning continues to build around you, and with it the promise of movement, effort, and purpose. The night is not forgotten, but it no longer holds you. You draw one last breath of the cool early air, then let it out slowly, preparing yourself for the day that waits aboard this narrow moving world. Standing fully awake makes everything hurt in a way lying down never did. As you shift your weight and begin to rise, your body protests, immediately muscles stiff and uncooperative after hours of stillness. The bench releases you reluctantly, as if it had moulded itself around your shape overnight and is not quite ready to let go. You pause halfway up, bracing a hand against the hull. The wood is cool, faintly damp and reassuringly solid. You give yourself a moment, letting blood move back into places that forgot what circulation felt like. Pins and needles bloom along your legs, sharp but brief. You breathe through it, jaw clenched, eyes half closed. This stiffness is not a surprise. Anyone who has slept on a longship would expect it. Narrow benches, constant motion, limited space to stretch. Bodies pay the price for adapting. You straighten a little more vertebra by vertebra until you are upright enough to steady yourself without leaning. Around you, others are doing the same careful dance. No one springs to their feet. Movements are slow, deliberate, shaped by experience. Someone rolls their shoulders, gently wincing. Another flexes their hands, opening and closing fingers to shake off numbness. A third stands still for a full breath before taking a step, testing balance. The ship feels different now that you are upright. The motion that once rocked you towards sleep now demands cooperation. You widen your stance instinctively, feet adjusting to the subtle sway beneath you. Balance comes quickly, the body remembering what the night taught it. Your clothes feel stiff and heavy. Wool that warmed you overnight now clings awkwardly damp in places, smelling more strongly of salt and sweat. You tug at a sleeve, trying to free it from where it stuck to your skin. The fabric resists, then releases. Everything aboard carries evidence of use. Nothing feels fresh. You reach for your cloak and shake it gently, careful not to spray moisture onto anyone nearby. Droplets scatter anyway, catching the dim morning light before disappearing. The cloak is heavier than it was yesterday, but still serviceable. It will dry when it can. At sea, perfection is not the goal. Function is. Your back aches in a broad, dull way, as if every muscle along your spine has something to say. You roll your shoulders again, slower this time, feeling tightness ease slightly. The relief is small but noticeable. You take it without complaint. People who study skeletal remains from seafaring communities often note signs of repeated strain. Compressed vertebrae, worn joints, adaptations that suggest a life spent balancing, bracing, pulling. Standing here stiff and sore after a single night, you gain a quiet respect for bodies that endured this routinely. Someone near you stretches their arms overhead briefly, then stops, remembering how little space there is. They settle for smaller movements instead, or rotating wrists, tilting their heads side to side. The restraint feels automatic. Big gestures belong to land. You take a cautious step forward, then another, finding your balance more easily with each movement. The deck responds underfoot, familiar now, its slight give no longer surprising. You know where to place your feet to avoid coils of rope or uneven boards. Night taught you more than you realized. A yawn escapes you before you can stop it, wide and unguarded. Your jaw cracks faintly. You cover your mouth out of habit, though no one seems to mind. Yawning is contagious here. Another follows, then another, passing along the ship like a signal that the night's hold is loosening. The smell of morning settles in fully now. Cooler air, wet wood, wool that has been worn too long without drying properly, beneath it all the clean edge of open water. It feels bracing, even invigorating once you are fully upright. Sleep lingers in your limbs, but awareness sharpens. You glance down at the bench where you spent the night. It looks narrower than it felt, less forgiving. You wonder briefly how you managed to rest on it at all. The answer is simple. You had no choice. Others are already transforming the space. Bedding disappears quickly. Cloaks are folded or draped where they can air. Personal items are secured again. The ship sheds its nighttime skin, efficiently returning to its working shape without fuss. You feel a pang of reluctance, small but real. Sleep, even uncomfortable sleep, offered a pause. Standing here, sore and awake, the day's demands begin to press in. But the feeling passes. The rhythm of the ship does not linger on hesitation. You bend carefully to retrieve something near your feet and feel your lower back complain sharply. You straighten again, immediately wincing. Lesson learned. You adjust your movements using knees more, relying on balance rather than bending. The ship encourages good habits through discomfort. Someone claps another lightly on the shoulder in passing, a brief gesture of acknowledgement. Not celebration, not sympathy, just recognition. You made it through the night, so did they. As you settle fully into wakefulness, the soreness becomes background noise, manageable and expected. It will ease as the day goes on, replaced by different aches earned through movement. This cycle feels strangely comforting. Pain with purpose is easier to accept than pain without context. The Longship continues forward now, clearly in its daytime mode. The night softness is gone, replaced by readiness. You take one more deep breath, filling your lungs with cool air, then let it out slowly. Your body stands stiff but capable. Your mind feels clear, sharpened by fatigue and rest combined. The night has done its work, however imperfectly. You are sore, you are tired, and you are ready for whatever comes next. Sleep disappears quickly once the ship fully wakes. There is no lingering softness, no slow drifting back and forth between states. The space you rested in only hours ago changes character almost immediately. What served as bedding is folded, shaken, tucked away. What felt like a shared dormitory turns back into a working platform with surprising speed. You watch this happen around you and then join in hands, moving before thought catches up. The cloak you slept in is lifted, checked for dampness, and repositioned where it will not interfere with movement. Any straw that might have been used is gathered and removed. Nothing is left loose. Loose things trip feet. Loose things slide. Loose things become problems. The bench that cradled you through the night is no longer a place to lie. It is a seat again, a workstation, a surface meant for leverage and effort. You feel that shift in your posture immediately. Your body straightens without being told. Rest has ended. Purpose takes its place. There is something almost ritualistic about how quickly this happens, even though no one frames it that way. Years of repetition have smoothed the process down to essentials. No one asks what goes where. Everyone already knows. Morning does not bring discussion, it brings action. You fold your cloak carefully, not neatly, just efficiently, keeping damp sections exposed to air if possible. It will dry when conditions allow. If not, it will be worn damp again. This calculation feels automatic now. Comfort is secondary, readiness matters more. Around you others do the same. A chest lid opens briefly, then closes. A strap is tightened. A weapon is repositioned so it will not knock or snag. The ship fills with quiet, purposeful sound, leather shifting, wood tapped lightly, metal touched and stilled. This transformation from night to day reveals something important. Sleep aboard a longship is never a destination. It is a temporary adjustment. The ship itself never changes its priorities. It is always about movement, balance, and response. Rest fits into that framework only as long as it does not interfere. You feel a faint reluctance as the last traces of night are packed away. Not because the sleep was pleasant, but because it represented a pause. Pauses are rare here, but the feeling passes quickly. There is no space to indulge it. You test your footing again as you step forward. The deck feels familiar now. You know where it dips, where it flexes, where your foot should land to stay steady when the ship rolls. This knowledge came quietly earned during the night without formal instruction. Someone nearby hands you an item without a word. You take it, automatically recognizing its place and purpose. Cooperation here does not rely on conversation. It relies on awareness. Eyes track minute. Hands anticipate needs. The air feels more open now, though the space has not changed. Light filters in faintly enough to define edges and distances. The ship feels larger when everyone is upright, moving engaged. The closeness that felt unavoidable at night now feels functional, even efficient. You glance once more at the bench where you slept. It looks different now that you're not lying on it. Narrow, hard, clearly not designed for rest. The fact that it served that purpose at all feels impressive in retrospect. Adaptation does the heavy lifting here. There is no ceremony marking the end of sleep. No acknowledgement that the night is over. It simply is. Attention shifts forward without looking back. The sea does not care how well you rested. The ship does not pause for lingering thoughts. Your body begins to warm as you move, stiffness easing slightly with each step. Muscles complain less once they are asked to work. Motion feels good now, even necessary. The soreness becomes something you carry rather than something you fight. You notice how quickly the ship becomes orderly again. Night introduced softness and improvisation. Morning restores structure. Everything has a place. Everyone has a role, even if it changes throughout the day. This transition feels important. It teaches you something about how people lived this way. Sleep was not sacred. It was practical. It existed to support the work, not replace it. That understanding shapes how rest is approached, how much is expected from it. You secure your last loose item and step fully into the working rhythm of the ship. The night feels distant, already compressed into a memory of motion, cold closeness and half-dreams. Useful, but finished. The longship moves on, unchanged by your fatigue or comfort, and as you take your place among the others, you realize that sleep here is never something you keep. It is something you use briefly before giving it back to the sea. As the day settles into its rhythm, you notice how the memory of sleep begins to change shape. What felt intense and immediate during the night now softens into something more reflective. You can recall the cold, the damp, the closeness, but they no longer press against you. Instead, they sit quietly in the back of your mind, already turning into experience rather than discomfort. You realize that sleeping aboard the longship has taught you something practical. Comfort is not always the goal. Function often matters more. The night did not offer ease, but it did offer enough rest to keep you moving, thinking, working. That balance feels deliberate, shaped by generations who learned exactly how little rest was necessary and how to make it count. Your body carries the lesson too. The stiffness eases gradually as you move, replaced by a steadier sense of strength. You feel more grounded than you did before sleeping, despite the narrow bench and constant motion. The rest you took was not deep, but it was efficient. It gave you just enough to meet the day without hesitation. You think about how this kind of sleep would reshape expectations over time. After enough nights like this, a soft bed might feel strange, even unnecessary. The body adapts not just to hardship, but to rhythm. Here the rhythm is dictated by water, wind and wood. Everything else adjusts around that. There are hints in the material record that people who lived much of their lives at sea developed a different relationship with rest. Rest altogether. Sleep became something flexible, taken in short stretches whenever conditions allowed. Lying down was not always required. Closing one's eyes and conserving energy could be enough. You begin to understand how that mindset forms. A small, easily overlooked detail comes to mind. Many tools and objects from seafaring cultures show wear patterns that suggest they were handled even during rest periods. Hands stayed busy, mind stayed lightly alert. Sleep did not mean complete disengagement. It meant shifting into a quieter mode. You glance around the ship as others work. No one talks about the night. There is no comparison of who slept well or poorly. That information does not matter now. What matters is that everyone is here standing capable, moving forward. The night did its job simply by allowing that. You feel a quiet respect for the people who live this way regularly. Not admiration in a dramatic sense, but recognition. They shaped their lives around environments that did not bend easily. They learned to rest without luxury to recover, without stillness to trust their bodies to adapt. Your thoughts drift briefly to how modern sleep is often treated as something fragile, something that must be protected and optimized. Here, sleep is resilient. It happens in spite of noise, discomfort, and interruption. It does not need ideal conditions, it needs opportunity. The longship moves steadily beneath you, its motion now a familiar presence rather than a challenge. You no longer think about where to place your feet or how to brace yourself. Your body handles those decisions on its own. That ease is the true gift of the night. Not rest alone, but adaptation. You notice how the memory of closeness has shifted too. What once felt intrusive now feels like shared endurance. The night pressed everyone together, and in doing so it reduced distance in ways that daylight never does. That bond does not need to be named to be felt. As the day continues, the night's lessons remain quietly active. You move with more awareness. You conserve energy instinctively. You accept small discomforts without irritation. These habits linger long after the bench is forgotten. Sleeping on the longship did not make the journey easier. It made you better suited to it. That distinction matters. The night did not pamper you. It prepared you. And as you continue on, you carry that preparation with you, steady and unremarkable, woven into your movements and thoughts. The memory of the bench, the wall, the motion, and the shared space fades into the background, but its effect remains shaping how you meet the world aboard this narrow-moving vessel. As the hours pass, the night you spent aboard the ship begins to feel less like something that happened to you, and more like something that belongs to you. The memory settles into place quietly, not demanding attention, but present whenever your thoughts drift back toward it. It does not replay as a series of events. It exists as a sensation, a mood, a physical understanding that lingers beneath everything else. You notice this when the ship moves in a familiar way and your body responds without thought. A slight roll, a shift in wind, your feet adjust automatically. Balance comes before awareness. That ease traces itself back to the night, to the hours spent listening, adapting learning without instruction. Sleep did not erase that learning. It sealed it. When you think of the bench, now you do not remember discomfort first. You remember the way your body eventually fit into it. How resistance faded. How stillness arrived, not because conditions improved, but because you stopped arguing with them. That lesson carries weight far beyond the night itself. The memory of shared space returns too softened by time. The press of bodies, the warmth passed back and forth without words, the quiet coordination of movement. What felt unavoidable then now feels purposeful. You understand how closeness became normal, even necessary, in a place where isolation would have been dangerous. Your mind circles these memories the way it circles a shoreline, never landing for long, just passing close enough to recognize familiar shapes. The smell of wool and tar, the sound of water against wood, the feeling of waking briefly and realizing everything was still intact. These details surface and sink again unforced. You realize that the night taught you how little explanation is needed for endurance. No speeches, no motivation, just repetition, just acceptance. People did not survive these journeys because they enjoyed them. They survived because they learned how to live within limits without wasting energy wishing those limits away. The memory of fear returns as well, but dulled, stripped of urgency. It no longer feels sharp or threatening. Instead, it feels instructive. Fear existed. You noticed it. You did not let it rule you. That balance feels important, something worth remembering beyond this single voyage. You think about how this kind of sleep would linger in the body long after reaching land. How a bed might feel too soft, too still. How silence might feel strange without the constant murmur of movement. The idea does not trouble you. It simply feels plausible. The night aboard the longship becomes a reference point, a quiet standard against which other nights might be measured. Not because it was better, but because it was honest. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was promised. Rest came when it could and left when it had to. You sense how these memories would grow simpler with time. Details would blur, edges would soften. What remained would be the feeling of being carried not just by the ship, but by shared effort and accumulated knowledge. That feeling is resilient. It does not depend on remembering every sound or sensation. As you move through the day, the memory surfaces in small ways. When you pause before overreacting to discomfort. When you adjust instead of resisting. When you trust a structure or routine to do its work without constant supervision. These habits trace back to the night without announcing themselves. You realize that sleeping aboard the ship did more than rest your body. It recalibrated your expectations. It showed you how much you actually need, how little is essential when energy is conserved and attention is focused. That understanding feels grounding. The memory does not feel heroic. There is no drama attached to it. That too feels important. Endurance here is quiet, almost invisible. It looks like lying still on hard wood. It looks like breathing slowly in the dark. It looks like waking and standing up anyway. You glance out towards the water, now visible in daylight, and feel a faint echo of the night stir in your chest. The sea looks different now, less mysterious, more familiar. You know what it sounds like when you're trying to sleep. You know how close it feels in the dark. That knowledge does not make it smaller. It makes it more real. The longship continues on unchanged by your reflection. It does not care what you remember or forget. It moves according to its shape and the forces around it. That indifference feels strangely comforting. It allows memory to exist without needing to matter. As the day wears on, the night recedes further, becoming less immediate, more settled. But it does not disappear. It stays with you as a kind of background understanding, shaping how you move and think without asking for attention. You carry the night the way you carry balance. Quietly, automatically, without comment. And in that way it continues to do its work long after sleep itself has ended. By the time the day has fully claimed the ship, the night feels distant, as if it happened to another version of you. And yet something of it remains settled deep enough that it does not need recalling. The longship moves forward with the same steady confidence it carried through darkness, and you move with it quieter inside than before. You realize that sleeping here was never meant to be remembered in detail. It was not designed to leave behind vivid stories or dramatic moments. Its purpose was simpler. To reset you just enough, to carry you through the hours when movement did not stop but effort could pause. The night did exactly that without flourish or apology. The bench, the wool, the closeness, the cold, the damp, all of it fades into a single impression rather than separate memories. You do not miss any of it. You also do not reject it. It becomes part of the journey, inseparable from rowing, watching the horizon, feeling the wind change. Sleep is folded into travel the same way rest is folded into work. You notice how natural this feels now. The idea of stopping completely, of lying down somewhere untouched by motion, feels less necessary than it once did. You understand on a physical level how people could cross long distances like this day after day, night after night. Not because it was easy, but because it was enough. The ship hums beneath your feet, alive with quiet effort. You trust it in a way that would have seemed strange yesterday. That trust did not arrive suddenly. It grew during the night through small proofs repeated over and over. Nothing broke. Nothing failed. Morning came. You glanced